And I think one must not simplify this in the sense that what we see or what we saw happening to the opposition did not start 2 weeks or 2 months or 2 years ago. This has been an ongoing process spanning many years where any opposition that became credible was systematically dismantled, most of the time by force, and many of the people who drove these processes were dead, even if they left Russia and fled the country. So yes, I think a very clear message that opposition that are credible will not be tolerated, will not be allowed to exist, and do not have any place in an election campaign in Russia.
The fact that some people were willing to appear in public and show their support for Navalny, is that significant in any way?
Yes, it is significant in one way, in that shows that no authoritarian leader can get complete control and totally remove any opposition. We see that in some of the most repressing countries in the world, where you always find some form of opposition being visible. But that does not change the fact that you do achieve the level of control that is not matched in any other free and open society.
Putin says he's doing this for his people. Russia is an ally against imperialism. In a way, this is probably a big question. Do you think the global south sees this as a democratic election? Do you think Russia sees itself as a democracy, or Putin?
In an ironical way, probably yes. I think in the south, Russia is seen as a model for many. We know that democracy is not that strong and entrenched in the south. There are few countries in the south that are really democratic or completely accept the values and the processes of democracy. Many try to achieve that, but it's very difficult. It's a long-term process, and we often see backsliding happening. And that is where personal interests and specific or particular interests come into play and may triumph the ideas and ideals of democracy in the short to medium term. What we see in Russia is a system that has been ingrained for decades and decades and decades, and with the correct mix of leadership and power, it's very easy to recreate what was existent, for instance, in the times of Stalin, and to that is become the way things are being done. And any problems that exist will be blamed on not following those political practices that have been established.
When Putin invaded Ukraine, the West, almost in a slightly sort of celebratory way, seemed to think this was the beginning of the end of Putin, that, this would lead perhaps to some sort of democratic opposition or change in Russia. When Prigozhin's Wagner group sort of marched on Moscow, this was seen as evidence that something was going to shift. Putin looks stronger now, perhaps, than he ever has.
I think what you're looking at in Russia are the contradictions of being stronger and looking stronger. At the same time, you see the weaknesses. And that is always the danger in an authoritarian society. And that is that the weaknesses are not always amplified, are not always clear, and may suddenly present themselves and create crises. In Russia, it's not likely to happen in the short term. What it indicates is that there is a political will to destroy opposition, no matter what needs to be done. It signifies the strength of the leadership, the control of the leadership, but it also signifies that there are always weaknesses, there are always problems, and something may happen to trigger the unhappiness of people. So one has to be aware. I think the issue with the expectations in the West is that it's based too much on wishful thinking, looking for the weaknesses, looking for Putin falling from grace. It normally doesn't work like that. And I think we see a lot of ill-conceived ideas being pushed around to demonstrate whoever wants to achieve in terms of Russia. Fact of the matter is Putin is a strong leader, he's in control. Yes, he is going to face problems in future, but his economy seems to be doing well. For how long, no one can venture to explain, but he's in control and he's a strong leader, and he will not allow anyone to intimidate him or stand in his way.
And I presume that the only way to success in Russia is sort of through Putin, by which I mean, if you want to improve your position in society, you need to sort of be, along with him in some way.
Well, that's the strength of Putin, is nothing happens without him or people close to him allowing it. But that's also in the long term the danger, that you may overplay your hand, you may make mistakes, you definitely create enemies. I think the key here is the ruthlessness of Putin. We've seen how many people that started to oppose him have died mysteriously, all sorts of accidents. And that's not making fun of it. It's the reality of you have to work through Putin and the people around him if you want to achieve something.
Roland Henwood, thank you, political scientist and commentator at the University of Pretoria. 27 minutes after 6.
This is SAFM Sport with Zai Khan.
Zai, good morning.
Good morning.
Timber and Nkosi Lorch, eh?
Man of the Match award, his first one in Sundowns colours, by the way. Although Sundowns were made to labour to their 2-0 Nedbank Cup last 16 win by a very inventive Maritzburg United at Lucas Moripa Stadium, it was Nkosi Lorch, his brace in the 74th and 95th minutes, which earned Sundowns the victory. Here's their coach, Rulani Mokwena.
I asked for more at half time. I think we played well. I really do. Even in the first 18 minutes before that, with the weather conditions, I thought we were playing well, but no incision. Not hurting the opponents. Good possession, good control. No chances for the opponents except 1 or 2 balls over the top. But apart from that, I thought we were good. But still not good enough.
The other match saw TS Galaxy advancing to the quarterfinals of the Nedbank Cup as well. They had a 3-0 win over De General, and all happened at the Free State Stadium. Elsewhere, Amad Diallo scored a stoppage time for Manchester United. 4-3 was the score against Liverpool in one of the greatest FA Cup ties, while Chelsea, they battled to a 4-2 victory against Leicester, booking their spot in the FA Cup semi-finals. Closer to home, cricket action, 4 wickets by Bayer Swanepoel and 3 by Patrick Kruger saw the Warriors claim a 4th win in a row after a 32-run bonus point win over the Rocks in their Cricket South Africa T20 Challenge clash in Gqeberha yesterday. And tennis action, Iga Swiatek dominating Maria Sakkari to win the Indian Wells final 6-4, 6-love, and claim the title for the second time in the Californian desert. While in the men's draw, Carlos Alcaraz, he beat Daniel Medvedev 7-6, 6-1. For the second straight year at the BNP Paribas Open final yesterday, earning his first title since winning Wimbledon last year. Onto cycling, the 8-day Cape Epic mountain bike race began near Cape Town yesterday, covering a distance of 617 kilometers. The women's section was won by Anne Terpstra of the Netherlands and Swiss Nicole Koller of the Ghost Factory Racing team, finishing 65 seconds ahead of Austria's Mona Mitterwallner and Candice Lill of South Africa, riding for Cannondale Racing Factory. Now, both riders in each team have to complete the stage to register a time. It's a 2-rider teams that will be racing. In the men's event, Nino Schurter of Switzerland and Denmark's Sebastian Feeney riding for World Bicycle Relief. They won by 51 seconds from South Africa's Matthew Beers and Howard Grotz of the United States. Now, today's opening stage is an 88-kilometer loop, and it will be a climb event, and with the event concluding in Stellenbosch, and that will be on Sunday. And finally, some marathon news. Kenyan long-distance runner Asbel Ruto won the Rome Marathon yesterday, beating his previous record by 3 minutes. Ruto finished with a record time of 2 hours, 6 minutes, and 23.61 seconds. And that's where we'll leave it for now. We'll bring you more sport on Sunrise, top of the hour. I'm Zai Khan.
Zai, thanks very much indeed. Good morning. You're with SFM leading the conversation. We'll talk more about the water problems in Joburg in a little while. It's just gone 6:30.
And in the headlines, the ANC President Cyril Ramaphosa has emphasized the need for political tolerance. This follows an alleged attack on some ANC members at a government event in Kwaqeza in Nongoma, northern KwaZulu-Natal on Saturday. A statement by the party alleges that the attack was carried out by IFP members. However, the IFP in Ulundi has denied the allegations. In other news, a witness is expected to be called to the stand when Senzo Meyiwa murder trial resumes this morning. On On Friday, 2 confession statements allegedly made by accused number 1 and 2 revealed that singer Kelly Khumalo allegedly ordered the hit. Meyiwa was shot and killed in 2014 while at Khumalo's parental home in Vosloorus on Gauteng's East Rand. And the Israeli military says it has launched what it calls a precise operation in parts of Al-Shifa Hospital in Gaza City. Details on these and other stories at the top of the hour.
SAFM, guiding you through the rush hour traffic.
Very good morning. Major delays coming out of Pretoria on the M1 South from Montana. There's been quite a big crashing, blocking multiple lanes between Sefako-Makato and Stormful Road. So the highway is very heavily backed up. If you're coming off the N4, the Bekwena Highway, or coming south through Durham Plaza, just ahead you will hit a major backlog of traffic through Montana exit and all the way down halfway to Stormful Road. If you come from Montana along Sefako-Makato, some very heavy traffic just trying to get into that N1. Multiple lanes are closed on the N1 going south. Trans-Orania, some traffic light faults south of Dustport Tunnel, so that's quite a heavy backlog already. And there's been a bit of protesting reported at the Diepkloof interchange, so there's some extra delays coming up the N1 North. I think it's under control from what I'm reading, from what I'm seeing, and the traffic load's busy rather than sort of heavy blockage, standstill stuff. So just a bit of extra delay coming from Eldos and Devlin up the N1 this morning. Durban, a broken down bus, N3 inbound, ramp to the N2 North at Spaghetti Junction. It looks like an issue top of Fields Hill this morning. M13 driving from the golf course side through Kloof on towards Fields Hill is quite heavily backed up. Cape Town traffic, some load shedding around the Ottery, Philippi, Strandfontein areas until 8 this morning. So Strandfontein Road, Spine Road noticeably busy. And the N1 super busy as well. Traffic already under pressure across all lanes from Brackenfell right through to Sable Road and sort of on towards Kuberg interchange. Rob Byrne, SAFM Traffic.
The business update on SAFM.
Ray McClark, good morning. How are you doing?
Good morning. Oh, good, thanks. Hi there.
Asian markets, US markets, how are they looking?
Well, both markets are mostly up. The investor focus this week will be on the interest rate decision by the U.S. Central Bank. That decision is expected on Wednesday. It is widely expected that the U.S. Central Bank will leave interest rates unchanged and give clues about the outlook for interest rates. So before the U.S. market opens later today, the U.S. futures market is up. Nasdaq, Dow Jones and S&P futures are each up 0.3%. In Asian markets, Japan's Nikkei is up 2.1%. China's Shanghai Composite is also up 0.5%. And Hong Kong's Hang Seng is down 0.1%. And in the currency market, there is some weakness in the dollar against the rand. The local currency is 18.77.
And then consumer inflation data for February coming out this week.
Yeah, on Wednesday, Statistics South Africa will publish consumer inflation data for February. This inflation data is important because the Reserve Bank will consider it when it makes its interest rate decision next week. The inflation rate last measured at 5.3% in January, mainly driven up by the many petrol and diesel price increases. Economists expect the inflation rate to remain unchanged at 5.3% in February. The Reserve Bank believes that the inflation rate is still high, and this is why the bank is not yet ready to cut interest rates. The bank wants the inflation rate to fall to 4.5% before it can consider cutting interest rates.
And retail sales data for January also coming out.
Yeah, on Wednesday, Statistics South Africa will also publish retail sales for January. Retail sales have been largely weak last year because consumer spending has been lower. Consumers are not participating in retail therapy because of the high cost of living and elevated interest rates. Economists at Nedbank and FNB expect retail sales to come in weaker in January.
Ray McClark, thank you very much indeed. Ray, of course, back with us tomorrow in an hour. More business news through the day here on SAFM.
Africa Update on SAFM Sunrise, a continental overview of current African affairs.
Russ Advocate Sipho Montula from the Thabo Mbeki African School of Public and International Affairs at UNISA. Good morning. How are you doing?
Steve, for a fresh morning and Jumbo Africa to the listeners.
In Senegal, the opposition leader there, Ousmane Sonko, vowing to help his party win elections.
Stephen, remember he was released last week on Thursday, and he has already went on the campaign with his ally, which is Basir Diomaye Faye, who was also released on Thursday last week as an opposition presidential candidate. The Senegal decides, Stephen, on the 24th of March. This is this coming week. Now, when he went out in the street, he says they need to fight corruption in the government. They need to also protect the Senegal's economy from the influence of foreign powers. We know, Stephen, there's been hectic in that region of West Africa, and with Macky Sall releasing most of the opposition parties and allowing political freedom in that country. So we'll expect Senegal, as it decides, Stephen, that it will be peaceful elections. We know many observer missions will be going down in Senegal from AU to the Commonwealth, as well as the ECOWAS region that will be observing those elections.
And then the military government of Niger revoking its cooperation pact with the US with immediate effect.
Stephen, this is a serious blow to the American foreign policy and also to their military relations with Niger post Bazoum's era. Now, here we are talking of 650 personnel of the U.S. military who has been working in Niger since last year, December. Now, this shows that Niger is moving away, Stephen, from both USA, both from France, and the military government said that the issue is that they don't see the need to have the military presence in their region, as it was under the guise of fighting the what they call the military terrorists that were in that Sahel region. Now Niger, with immediate effect, even over the weekend, saying that we are revoking our military relations with the USA.
And then in South Sudan, they're closing all schools. They're preparing for an extreme heat wave.
Stephen, it is today actually in Juba and some parts of the province, as they are saying that it will take 2 weeks. Both the Health and Education Ministry saying that the temperatures in South Sudan, we are talking about 45 degrees Celsius, even very hot in the South Sudan. So they are thinking of the children that they will face this heat rather than facing the heat. They should close down all the schools for 2 weeks. The other challenge, Stephen, is that in the South Sudan, you don't have what we call the air conditioners in those schools. And that's what has been urged by communities to say they should be connected to the electricity grid so that they can have those air conditioners for the children. Now you have 2 weeks of school holidays for the children in South Sudan.
Yeah, 43 degrees. It's very hot. Yeah. In the DRC, the Justice Department there reinstating the death penalty. Why?
Stephen, the issue of the Eastern DRC, if you know that they've been riddled with conflicts for almost 2 decades now, and you have more than 120 armed groups fighting for land and power. The Ministry of Justice saying that they need to go back to the 2003 resolution to say that they need to reinstate the death penalty to curb the violence and the military attacks that are in the Eastern DRC. As you know, Stephen, once you bring the death penalty, the human rights organizations will come out here and say, we don't agree with you. Looking at the African Charter on Human and People's Rights, looking at the UN Human Rights Charter to say, how do you bring the death penalty when actually you should be dealing with the capital punishment as well as the long sentences? But the government saying that the challenges that are in the Eastern DRC, Stephen, have pushed them to bring the death penalty.
And then in our archives, this day, 18th of March, 1994.
Stephen, we are still on celebrating our 30 years of democracy and freedom, but it was important just on the eve of elections. The Judge Goldstone Commission published its report on the allegations of the third force. You know, the third force, even it involved the then apartheid government, as well as allegations of the IFP being involved in the third force. Now, on this day, Judge Goldstone released that report, a very controversial report, Stephen, as it was on the just a month before the 1994 elections in South Africa. Asante Sana SG, that's what's still leading the conversation, SAFM, observing the human rights man.
U.S. Advocate Sipho Montula, thank you very much indeed. I sort of remember parts of that. I was very young at the time, but it was all very important. You look back now, and it was just so important, wasn't it? 20 minutes now to 7.
Call us on 086 000 2032.
Well, that's the number to dial. Lots going on. Big focus, of course, on KwaZulu-Natal this morning, as you would expect, and in a way, not entirely surprising. Voice notes coming through on 0614104107.
Morning, Steve. It's Chris in Camperdown. 30 years ago, Richard Goldstone released a report on violence in KZN, and yet today we speak about the childish shenanigans that we saw in what was supposedly a government event, which actually was an electioneering event. That brings about two key things: the use of state resources for electioneering, but secondly, the quality of leaders that we need. This is a very important fact that people must consider going to the national and provincial government elections. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Chris and Camperdown. Errol on the line from Durban. You heard that conversation around the Russian President, Vladimir Putin?
Yeah, I hope you can hear me, Stephen.
Yeah, we can. Errol, go for it.
Okay, yeah, I was just saying too, before I even heard you saying that those elections are a bit of a joke, because Putin, I mean, all his political opponents are either languishing in jail or have been put to death. So talk about illegal elections.
Mm.
And Donald Trump does the same sort of thing. It's not as bad, but Donald Trump will get elected come hell or high water through any means.
Yeah.
So, yeah, no wonder they get on together.
All right, Errol, thank you. Yeah, look, I mean, some people do just push the system, don't they? All right, you know the number 086 000 2032, 18 minutes to 7.
SAFM. Prime time all day long.
In Gauteng, still major problems with the supply of water through Rand Water and Joburg Water into parts of Johannesburg. Reports now that some areas in Soweto had a very difficult weekend. Some, it seems, running dry. Some suburbs in Randburg have been battling without reliable supplies of water for nearly 2 weeks. And I remember so clearly the moment that this started, when City Power in Joburg, Isaac Mangena, I remember, telling us about the problems at the Aikenhof pumping station. That started all of this. But Rand Water and Joburg Water also both say that the hot water in Joburg over the last 3 weeks has played a big role in keeping demand high, which means they can't fill their reservoirs. So, you know, if there was maybe a lot of rain, maybe that would make a big difference, but I wouldn't bet on a lot of rain at this stage. Dennis Pretorius is the CEO of the Chamber of Business in the West Rand in Joburg. Dennis, good morning.
Good morning, John. Nice to be with you, and good morning to your listeners as well.
Your members obviously need reliable supplies of water to operate. What impact has all of this had on them?
Well, you know, you have two groups of members, the very small businesses that cannot really plan for this sort of thing. I'm thinking of the car washers, the people that cook and prepare meals for other people and sell it, and depend on that as their sole income, and they've been affected quite badly. Big business generally have the capacity to overcome short term, and not that 10 days is a short term, but they can manage the problem. I see the problem at this stage more for the small and medium businesses that don't have the capacity. The big problem is the lack of confidence as a result of this. And this makes people think, should I invest? The big business, should I put money into new capacity? Should I commit myself for future business? If this is the trend in South Africa, where there is a total confidence deficit, we've gone through COVID pretty well. I think people managed to do the right things at the right time for the wrong reasons. But the electricity and now also the water problems make it very difficult for big business to have the confidence for the future.
You also have to spend money investing in backups, and you talk about confidence. I mean, yes, you can have backup water supplies, but that means you have less money to spend on your business, and other people have less money to spend on your product, so you lose out either way.
You're quite right, but, you know, people can handle short-term things where you run short of water, and you have the capacity to have rainwater tanks that give you a backup to for a certain period. But if it's an ongoing thing, and this is the problem behind this whole thing, is the lack of planning by municipalities, lack of planning by people like Rand Water to have the capacity and to save water. If you look at generally in South Africa in municipalities, the loss of water, call it the unaccounted for water in municipalities, range between 40 and 50% of their total water income, or their input of water, and that's a devastating figure. And from national and provincial and local government level, they must start planning. The Treasury, the National Treasury, says one should spend about 8% of the value of your assets per annum to do maintenance. Municipalities generally spend about 4 to 5%. So that deficit of 4% in terms of the spending is part of the problem. Let's take Mogale City or Krugersdorp as an example. In the last few weeks, they've had major water leaks in the CBD, and a lot of the small SMMEs operate in the CBD, where they've had, at one point in time, they had 6 different breaks in the central business area. Sure. They don't have the capacity to do all that work at the same time, so they turn off valves, and often, like what happened in Johannesburg North, they forget to open the valve again once they've done the work. So it's a confidence problem. It's a problem of maintenance of infrastructure. The major pipes in the Krugersdorp area are asbestos cement pipes that were laid 40 to 50 years ago. And it's beyond its life. They should have invested in plans to replace those pipes over the period, but they haven't done so. They often budget to spend that money. They budget for 6, 7, 8%, but they don't spend because it's not an immediate problem. They rather use the money for immediate problems. So it's an ongoing problem, and it's at the end, I believe it's the confidence thing that is going to affect us mostly.
Are you, as business, I mean, are councils, are people involved in the problems around water, Joburg Water, etc., are they keeping you in the loop about what's going on?
Well, we have obviously WhatsApp groups that people talk on. We, as the chamber, manage 2 old age villages, and we have direct contact in those villages with old people that suffer from the lack of water when this happens. They can't bath. They have to buy drinking water. Fortunately, we have the capacity of 2 boreholes on the 2 properties that we can have water for toilets and things like that, because the water in the boreholes are not suitable for human consumption. But at least you can do a bit of watering of the gardens for the old people, but you have to go out and buy water to keep them going.
Dennis Pretorius, thank you.
So yes.
Dennis Pretorius, thank you. Sorry to interrupt you. CEO at the Chamber of Business in the West Rand there, 11 minutes to 7. More on water as we go through the morning together.
SAFM, guiding you through the rush hour traffic.
Yeah, morning. Major delays coming out of Montana or coming along the N1 South in Pretoria. There's been a massive crash between Sefako-Makato and Stormful Road. Multiple lanes are closed, and Monday morning traffic running into that, and just pushing back all the way to the N4 Bakwena Highway. So the N1 South is very heavy. And then if you come from Montana, there's some really proper traffic congestion along Sefako-Makato on towards the highway, where you'll struggle to get into that congestion. And then others are queuing through the N1, trying to find alternative routes sort of via the Moloto Road Road extension. So it's all very heavily backed in that Montana part of Pretoria this morning. Also further down the N1's fairly heavy between John Foster Drive and Olifantsfontein. It's fully loaded across all lanes there. Just confirming there is a bit of protesting underway at the Deepcliff interchange. Police are on the scene. The N1 coming north is probably no busier than normal, so there's no blockage, no sort of need to divert, but just be aware of that. The planned protest did go ahead, but police obviously on the scene of that pretty quickly this morning. Busy on the N3, running out of Alberton, queues all the way up past Germiston Bedford, all the way through to Giluli's interchange. Looks like there might be a problem on the N3 ramp to the N12 east today. Durban side, the M13 stuck in a big bind as well, coming from Hillcrest, jamming all the way onto Fields Hill. Looks like there's a problem around Pioneer Road. Right at the top of Fields Hill is the issue there. The M2 inbound, leaving the south coast, that's reasonably heavy. Queues into the Prospecton area. And the M7 now starting to queue down to Bel Air Road with those roadwork disruptions in that area. Cape Town Marine Drive already under pressure from Bayside Junction right through to Racecourse Road. The M5 coming in from the south, heavy from Ottery. That's worth a mention. That's a very sort of early Monday pushback all the way through to the N2 highway. And even the R300 queuing up a little bit earlier than normal. There's some delays coming up through Kales River towards the Van Riebeek Road off-ramp. Rob Byrne, SAFM Traffic.
The cost of living crisis is real. Here's what one OUTsurance client did about it.
I'm Amy. I'm 26 from Kenilworth. When I got my 2022 Ford EcoSport, the immediate thought was to phone OUTsurance, and I pay only 819 Rand per month. No insurers were able to beat or match the premium that I'm currently paying.
Want a car insurance premium that'll blow your mind? SMS out to 30754 now for a quote and to find out about included benefits like panic assistance that sends the nearest medical or armed response unit to you wherever you may be 24/7. Here's Yusuf.
45 years old from Teigedal, Western Cape. I pay 700 Rand for my Polo 1.6 2021 model. If you haven't called OUTsurance yet, definitely get in touch.
Give it a go. SMS out to 30754 now. That's out to 30754. OUTsurance is a licensed insurer and FSP. T's, C's, and limits apply. Premiums are risk profile dependent and reviewed annually. Client comments do not constitute financial advice.
When South Africans think security, they think Trinidor. With 6 months interest-free financing and over 54 franchises around the country, you can always find the security product and price that's right for you. Visit trinidor.co.za or call 0861 Trinidor today. Trinidor, the ultimate crime barrier.
And we would buy 500 cars and we would buy 500 more. So sell your car for the best price and we won't think about it twice. We buy cars, we buy cars. We buy cars, we buy cars.
We buy cars, the easiest way to sell your car by far.
Seychelles have a plan to steal Malawi's joy. However, the Southern African outfit is not worried. They will reveal their strategy on the sand. It is another East versus South battle. This is the COSAFA Beach Soccer Championship 2023. Experience the battle on the sand between Seychelles and Malawi at the South Beach Arena in Durban. This Wednesday, 20 March 2024 at 10:30 a.m. Live on SABC Sport on TTT Channel 4. Also available on SABC Plus and SABCSport.com. Proudly brought to you by SABC Sport.
For the love of the game.
At SFM Radio and at Stephen Grootes on Twitter.
7 minutes now to 7 the time. Good morning. Well, over the weekend, the Good Party, led by the Tourism Minister Patricia de Lille, launching their manifesto, promising to deal with corruption and to introduce a basic income grant of 999 Rand a month. Well, the leader of Good, Patricia de Lille, is on the line for you now. Minister, good morning. Thanks for your time.
Good morning, Stephen.
What are the main points of your manifesto?
Well, our manifesto is a recipe to rebalance our society based on the 4 justices of social, economic, and spatial environment. But we specifically look at the issue of poverty, the extent of poverty that threatens to dismantle the gains that we've made. And if the economy cannot provide for the people's basic needs, the Constitution provides then that the responsibility falls to the state. And we feel the fact that the economy is not creating enough jobs is not the fault of the poor, and therefore we are proposing a further increase of the basic income grant. We've seen a recent increase of 20 Rand, which is really not sufficient. But, Stephen, this is not just an election slogan. We have tested the idea by taking 50,000 Rand of our own money and distributed to 50 individuals in Gauteng and Western Cape and the Eastern Cape. And we've definitely seen the impact of this, where we ask people to, each participant, to present a small business plan, how he or she would spend 1,000 Rand to build a livelihood. And the initial results have been very, very pleasing. And we feel that it is a demonstration of what the state could be doing at scale. And it can switch on thousands of new entrants into the economy. But the big question is then, how will this be funded? And we are proposing several ideas like allocative efficiency, adopting an approach of zero-based budgeting, also closing a lot of inefficient programs in government that don't yield the results on investment. And we've also looked that there are several poverty alleviation programs that can be substituted for the grants. But coming to also professionalizing the civil service and reform and review the current structure of government at all levels.
Okay.
But the main point is that corruption steals directly from the poor. And therefore, we're saying that whistleblowers must be incentivized, they must be protected, and they must be treasured.
Okay, I understand all of that, and the moral case for a basic income grant is a very strong one. Would you look at increasing taxes as well to pay for it?
Well, we have looked at the tax system. Currently, personal taxes is very high in South Africa. We think that we can look at how we can reform maybe corporate taxes is lower than personal taxes. And we're not saying that taxes must be increased, but we must first look at all of the other methodologies, like zero-based budgeting. We've seen over the years that what has happened with budgeting government is that it is just being adjusted to CPI and inflation, and sometimes not. So we are not hard and fast on just one solution, but a package of solutions that we think that can free up money for government.
You yourself are not a candidate for Parliament or for national government, as I understand it. You're actually the candidate, the Good Party candidate, for the position of Western Cape Premier. Why the Western Cape and not national?
No, that's not correct, Stephen. I am the face of the party nationally. Yes, the party structures has selected me to be the Premier candidate for the Western Cape. And if I get elected to both positions, then, I will have to decide then. But the structures felt within good that, because of my experience, I've run the city of Cape Town for 8 years, and I've also got fair and good knowledge and experience of the rest of the province, that we should be using that experience to, especially we feel that our manifesto, that's a recipe to rebalance society, could be applied here in the Western Cape to bring equity between the rich and the poor.
Can you really be on two lists? I mean, is that allowed under the Electoral Commission? Is it really, and is it a good political decision to do that? I mean, it seems to me you look like you're keeping your options open, and if no one gives you a nice cabinet position, Minister, you'll go to the Western Cape.
No. I've never expecting a cabinet position. That is the domain of the president. And like I said over the weekend, that this has been a culture in our country, started by our late President Nelson Mandela, that in every administration you've got a member in cabinet of the opposition party. So it's not that I'm an exception to the rule, and like other people claim that I am captured. No, not at all, Stephen. I'm here to serve my country in any capacity. And I put my faith in the voters of South Africa. They will decide. In 2019, there were over 22 new parties, and Good was one of the two parties that made it into Parliament. And since that, we've grown steadily in the local elections. We participated in 44 municipalities. We've got 50 councillors in 4 provinces. So Good is really a movement that's work in progress, and we grow steadily all the time.
Patricia de Lille, Minister of Tourism, but speaking here as leader of the Good Party, their manifesto launched over the weekend. Well, in a moment, more on the issue of privatisation. We're due to speak to Zwelinzima Vavi as well, General Secretary of SAFTA. He said over the weekend something that he's told you before, that supporting former President Zuma was a mistake. I'll ask him how he feels about Zuma and MK. All of that to come. You know the number, 086 000 2032. You're with SFM leading the conversation. It's 7 o'clock.
And impartial. This is SAFM News.
In top stories this hour, Ramaphosa appeals for political tolerance and Israel targets Al-Shifa Hospital in Gaza. Good morning. In election-related news, ANC President Cyril Ramaphosa has emphasized the need for political tolerance. This follows an alleged attack on some ANC members at a government event in Kwaceza in Nongoma, northern KwaZulu-Natal on Saturday. A statement by the party alleges that the attack was carried out by IFP members. However, the IFP in Ulundi has denied the allegations. The alleged attack also follows political tensions that played out between provincial ANC leader Siboniso Duma and Amazulu traditional Prime Minister Reverend Thulasizwe Buthelezi at the podium of the same event. Ramaphosa visited communities of the KwaZulu-Natal South Coast on an election campaign over the weekend. He appealed for tolerance and respect among political parties.
Leaders of various political parties to call on their members to desist from using violence, even articulating violence-ridden statements. That should not be happening at all, because we want our people to be free to make their own choices. What happened yesterday, most unfortunate, and we're totally against it. We are investigating it, and the police are also looking into it. And as I've said often, those who try to take our democracy for granted and try and even destroy it, there will be consequences.
Ramaphosa says the governing party will meet with the IFP to discuss the incident.
With regard to the incidents that happened yesterday, yes, of course, there will continue to be discussions with the IFP. IFP is a party that we work with in Parliament, we work with even in the legislature. They are the people that we can talk to. They have a leadership.
The Chief Financial Officer of the Northwest Development Corporation, Kudagwashe Mpofu, has resigned with immediate effect. His resignation comes after revelations that Mpofu, who is from Zimbabwe, allegedly fraudulently obtained his residence permit. Spokesperson for the Department of Economic Development, Jerry Madebesi, says they have noted the report by the Minister of Home Affairs, Aaron Motsoaledi, that Mpofu did not obtain his residence permit through his department and that the department does not know how he obtained his permit. A request has been made for the Special Investigation Unit, the SIU, to investigate the matter, and Madebesi added that they will cooperate fully with the investigation. A new witness is expected to be called to the stand when the Senzo Meyiwa murder trial resumes this morning. On Friday, 2 confession statements allegedly made by accused number 1 and 2 revealed that singer Kelly Khumalo allegedly ordered the hit. Meyiwa was shot and killed in 2014 while at Khumalo's parental home in Vosloorus on Gauteng's East Rand. 5 men are on trial at the High Court in Pretoria for the murder of the former Orlando Pirates and Bafana Bafana captain. Paul Makobane has more details.
In the statement, Ntanzi was paid 45,000 rand for the job. Police Officer Nhlanganyelwa Mboto was also called to testify about a confession statement made by accused number 1, Muzi Sibiya. Sibiya also implicates Sengakeli Khumalo, but Sibiya's statement also mentions name on some suspects who are not in court. According to the statement, it was Sibiya's friends from the Voslow's hostel, Marco Buthelezi and Makambi Buthelezi, that shot and killed Meyiwa. It's alleged Sibiya received 30,000 rand for the contract killing, while a traditional healer was paid 5,000 rand. Marco has since died. The trial is expected to continue this morning.
The LM Hospital outside Louis Trichardt in Limpopo continues to experience chronic water shortages. Last year, there were reports that the families of patients who had been admitted at the facility had to take buckets full of water for their relatives daily. The Limpopo Department of Health says the hospital is currently solely dependent on municipal water tankers as all other water sources have run dry. Spokesperson Neil Shikwambana says the National Department of Water and Sanitation has sent its officials to assess the situation.
The situation remains quite critical as the bulk supply line is completely constrained. The Limpopo Department of Health has in the past tried within its powers to alleviate the situation by drilling boreholes in and outside the hospital. However, the groundwater within the facility has been depleted. On the other hand, communities have also illegally connected themselves to the boreholes, rendering them completely ineffective to the hospital. In the meantime, the Vembe District Municipality is supplying the hospital with 8 to 10 water tankers daily.
And the Israeli military says it has launched what it calls a precise operation in parts of Al-Shifa Hospital in the Gaza City. A military spokesperson, Admiral Daniel Hagari, said the IDF had learned that senior Hamas terrorists had regrouped since the hospital and were using it as a command center to coordinate attacks against Israel.
Our targeted mission isn't just an operational necessity. It's a global imperative. Our forces have undergone specified training to prepare them for the sensitive environment and complex scenarios they may encounter. Our war is against Hamas, not against the people of Gaza. We seek no harm to the civilians that Hamas is hiding behind, which is why we will conduct this operation with caution and care.
And recapping our top story this hour, ANC President Cyril Ramaphosa has emphasized the need for political tolerance. This follows an alleged attack on some ANC members at a government event in Kwaceza in Nongoma, northern KwaZulu-Natal on Saturday. Headlines at the bottom of the hour. For SFM News, I am Nomalizo Mandela.
A very good morning to you in your SFM sports headlines. With the Nedbank Cup quarterfinal draw set to take place tonight, it is Mamelodi Sundowns who clinched their spot in the quarterfinals yesterday. And in tennis, Iga Swiatek and Carlos Alcaraz triumph as champions at Indian Wells. We'll bring you the details just before 7:30.
SAFM, guiding you through the rush hour traffic.
Major backlogging right through the Montana Dearport part of Pretoria this morning. It all stems from this major crash scene between Sefaka-Makato and Stormful on the M1 South. Multiple lanes are closed. Traffic's heavy all the way back to Durhanpur Plaza on the N1 and back into the N4 Durhanpur Plaza and Pumalani on the N1. So those highways, M1 and N4, are both heavy as you come through and join up and then link down towards the crash scene. Sefaka-Makato out of Montana coming across from Malotto Road towards the highway as well, very heavy. And a lot of traffic jamming on Malotto Road onto Baviansport on that alternative route through the Dearport area. There's major traffic congestion in that part of Pretoria this morning. Monument Park's being load shed, so the R21 slow both ways. Erasmus Kloof being load shed, so Solomon, Slangu, Delmas, Boeing, those routes under some pressure as well. Malabongwe Drive, north riding through the Stratham Park into Randburg's very slow. And the M2 is heavy today from Joe Slover all the way through to a busy Crown interchange area. Durban, a breakdown at Linfield Park. If you're Durban bound, coming out of Pietermaritzburg, it's heavy from Ashburton. There's a pretty equally heavy backlog going up to Pietermaritzburg with a breakdown at Ashburton. Crash right at the top of Fields Hill, the M13 from Hillcrest, really heavily jammed down to Kloof this morning. And Cape Town, a couple of standouts, the M5s at Ottery, right through to the N2 and the R300 queuing from Delft through to the Van Riebeek exit at Kales River. Rob Byrne, SAFM Traffic.
SAFM Sunrise. A vivid start to your day.
7:09, good morning. You're with SFM Sunrise. I'm Stephen Grootes. Well, lots going on as always this morning. We'll talk the issue of privatisation, get two different takes on it, and whether or not there is still scope really for a bigger role for the private sector. Let me not use the P word. Let me call it a bigger role for the private sector in SOEs. Who knows where it could end? We'll speak to Dr. Lumkile Mondi about it. Also, ask Nzima Vavi his view, the General Secretary of SAFTA. Other questions for him as well, of course, that we'll speak to him about. Your mediated conversation today in the US, Congress wants to ban TikTok. You know, the sort of video sharing service. It's a kind of sort of Twitter video, I suppose, if you like, however you want to describe it. We'll talk about that and whether that could happen here, what that does to relations between the US and China. I was astonished to sort of learn, I hadn't realized this, but India and Nepal also have banned TikTok, so the US isn't alone. There's a lot going on here. So all of that to come. You know the number, 086 000 2032. Of course, more on water issues as well. 7:10.
Those who love the beautiful game can never have enough of the incredible moments. Like the fascinating last-minute goals, the unbelievable saves, the top-of-the-range reviews of critical match scenarios by the legendary Mr. Ref, the mummies of the week, and highly knowledgeable analysts. Catch Soccer Zone on Mondays at 8 p.m. Live on SABC Sport on DTT Channel 4 and SABC 1 at 10 p.m. Also available on SABC Plus and SABCSport.com. Hashtag We Love It Here. Proudly brought to you by SABC Sport.
For the love of the game.
Attention filmmakers, are you ready? It's time to showcase the vibrant tapestry of KZN's cultural heritage at the Simon Mobuno Sabela KZN Film and Television Awards, South Africa's ultimate celebration of cinematic excellence. In partnership with the SABC and KZN EDTA, we champion innovation, paving the way for the future of cinema. This year we go beyond imagination. Edit your 1-minute submissions because calls for entries are now open until the 28th of March 2024. For more information, visit www.kznfilm.co.za or follow us on our social platforms. Join the conversation using hashtag SSA24. KZN Film, our kingdom is your stage.
Stephen Grootes on SAFM.
7:11. Good morning. Well, a series of comments over the last few days around the issue of privatisation, or rather, a private sector playing a bigger role in state-owned entities. Last week, the SAA deal with the Takatso consortium that would have seen the group buying a controlling stake of 51% in SAA. Well, that deal collapsed. Then yesterday, the Sunday Times reporting President Cyril Ramaphosa is saying government is still committed to getting money from the private sector because government can no longer afford to keep bailing out state-owned entities, and haven't we heard that so many times before? Dr. Lumkile Mondi is a lecturer at the Wits School of Business and Economics. Dr. Mondi, good morning. Thanks for your time.
Good morning, Stephen, and good morning to your listeners across the world.
It's a huge issue. Do you believe government is committed to having a bigger role for the private sector? I mean, do you see a future in which private companies are playing a bigger role in running or even controlling or maybe just helping SOEs?
I think the private sector is really going to shy away, given the recent experiences where government basically has gone back to state ownership. It is a very, very difficult question, Stephen. Remember that these entities were part of creating capability all the way from the General Smart's government in the formation of ESCOM, and other SOEs, including the IDCs, the FOSCO, the SASOL, etc., in the apartheid developmental stage, as Bill Frund argues. So I think the ANC itself, caught up ideologically by the commanding heights with the influence of Marxist and Russian influence during the Cold War, where the state in the Soviet Union played a critical role, bought into that ideology. I think this towing from state to market and back to the state again, it's a confused ideology which is found in the complexity of the ANC as an organization, where the left wants to go left and the right wants to go right, and therefore you're sending a very confusing message to South Africa and the private sector, and therefore they're going to shy away and watch as many state-owned enterprises collapse, including SAA.
I mean, do you think a private sector company would ever be offered a controlling stake in another SOE? I mean, we had Telkom, that seemed to go go relatively well. People look at Sasol now and some of what it's tried to do with gas prices, for example, where it has an absolute monopoly there. And I don't know if we would really say that that's been playing an enabling role in the economy. Sasol would obviously have a different view.
Stephen, I think private sector understand the wishes of the majority of South Africans. Remember that historically, black South Africans have been marginalized, and also they are the biggest constituent in the South African political economy. Therefore, there's an appreciation around the critical role of bringing blacks into the economy, and therefore the state becoming a player to bring blacks into that. So I think in the private sector that's well understood. I think where things frustrate private sector is the fact that even though those ambitions are carried by the state, in many cases, though the state want to dictate the operation, and because of the deployment committee of the ANC, they'll also deploy less capable people, and therefore frustrate the processes of implementing any dynamic transformation that is required in that organization to make the state benefit from that partnership, and the private sector get its return, because the private sector get only involved because they're going to make money. So I think that's what the scary part is, that inability of getting in and committing and letting private sector run when the state becomes tempted to say, by the way, for the broader transformation agenda, we want to bring in blacks there, but more important also citizen ownership, because the economy is owned predominantly by whites, and therefore that sits very uncomfortable with the ANC. So it is that challenge that until we resolve the issue of black participation in the economy, we're going to have this confusion around that. Therefore, if I was the ANC, I will push for a state-owned agenda of these enterprises and put capable people there and put resources behind it, because this thing of going in half full is leading paralysis and it's not resolving critical problems about the service and creating capabilities, particularly for SAA, given that so many entities could benefit from SAA becoming successful operational airline because of the linkages downstream in the aviation industry.
I mean, this always gets to the real problem. If the SOEs were run properly, Eskom, Transnet, SAA, we wouldn't be in this mess, would we? And then, absolutely. I mean, when the government says, no, we must, privatize or have a bigger role for the private sector, are they admitting they can't fix it?
No, they say they just want the money. They still want to run them the very same way. They're just chasing the money because when private sector put the money with them in control, they'll waste it again. So this is a bigger discussion. I think the president is pushing for privatization. I think not so much for the money. He wants capability, because he's realized that the deployment committee has failed South African people, because the deployees and some of the ANC comrades that are involved, that I mentioned in the Zondo Commission, aren't interested in development, but interested in filling their pockets and living in largesse, as we've seen in many post-colonial African countries. So I think that's a dilemma, and I think the call by President is to try and really bring capability with the cash along, which is a problem for many companies, because therefore, if the state doesn't have any influence or control, it means that they will starve, and that's where the political question is the ANC capable of driving a national agenda, in doing so putting the nation first before the interest of those in political power? And I think at the moment it's only the president that's pushing for it. It doesn't have support, unfortunately, and therefore we're going to have this dilemma for a long time of institutions collapsing, capabilities collapsing, and South Africa slowly declining as the biggest economy in the African continent.
I would imagine the elections make everything a lot more complicated. If we have coalition governments, administrations and national government later in the year, the question of privatization just gets more and more difficult.
It gets more complicated, because we have seen, the local government election, that even the coalition partners are not interested in the citizen at local level and fixing problems in our city, in the golden city of Johannesburg. They are interested in filling their pockets. So therefore, that experience for many voters were concerned that we may actually see the whole national government also getting influence to almost a collapse, as we have seen in many of our cities. Last week, we had a lot of action taking place at Kuruleni. The previous week, it was in the city of eThekwini, and nothing came out of it. So the biggest worry for us about coalition is whether are they not going to repeat the bad experience that we're having at local level, and therefore what you may see many voters who are opposed to the ANC but want stability at national level could end up voting the ANC, and ANC passing the 50 mark because of the fear that any coalition is going to bring collapse, which we have seen at local level.
Dr. Lumkile Mondi, thank you. Lecturer in the School of Business and Economics at Wits University with SFM, 19 minutes after 7. Let's get a different view on the SAA issue. The comments by the presidency over the weekend that the president's still committed to privatisation. Other issues to talk to him about as well. Zwelenzima Vavi is the General Secretary of the South African Federation of Trade Unions. Mr. Vavi, good morning. You consistently have opposed privatisation. I imagine your views haven't changed.
Absolutely. Every day we've indicated that privatization is an elite program that is meant to provide maximum profits to the companies that invest in the provisions of basic services to the people, and we are all the time proven right. Privatization is not a panacea. It doesn't lead to efficiency as it always touted. It leads to massive increases of the input cost, and it leads to jobs being lost. All the processes of privatization leads to those three.
How can we make government then, if that's your view, how would we make government run SOEs properly, avoid another Transnet, another Eskom, another SAA?
Exactly, that's where the problem is, There are two things there. Firstly, we have to have an efficient, capable developmental state in South Africa. Unfortunately, the current government have simply discredited the notion of a developmental, capable, interventionist state because of its sheer incompetence, and secondly, because it has been, in some instances, allowing the most inefficient, corrupt personalities to be deployed into critical positions where people simply have no skills except that they were politically connected. This is what have undermined all of the state enterprises, leading to them being weaker than before, more inefficient than before. And so every time you speak about enhanced role of the state, ordinary people then turn against the very idea of using the state to provide cheaper services to the poor, to then say, but can't you see already Eskom is in tatters, Tinel, Transnet, Petro SA, SABC, you name them all. So unfortunately, this inefficiency is what is strengthening the right wing in the country to now dismiss all of the pro-poor programs because they are being discredited by the inefficiency of the current government.
You talk about people who were appointed to parastatals, to SOEs who, really didn't play a good role. For part of the time that this happened, Jacob Zuma was president, and I saw you said again over the weekend that supporting him was the biggest mistake of your life. I think you've told us here on SAFM Sunrise before that you regret that. When you see him campaigning for MK now, there's some predictions that MK will do very well. What do you think is happening in our politics that's creating the space for Zuma or for Mkhonto weSizwe, as it's currently known, to get so much support?
It's desperation. Look, people have short memories and people act in the most unprincipled manner. People wear regional politics. People even wear tribal politics when they are confronted with the difficulties. Here's one difficulty. Electricity prices have increased over the past 17 years by 507%. The 12.74% approved by NERSA means that electricity prices will go to 541%. The petrol prices are now at 24.45 cents. The food inflation has increased by 6.2%. meaning that you need 5,277 rands now to buy food. Interest rates are sitting at 11.75%. Unemployment is sitting at 42%, and the youth unemployment around 66%. But for those who are below the age of 25, youth unemployment is sitting at around 74%. This is a disaster. We call it a precipice. It's a total disaster. But then people faced with this crisis, they turn around to look for some savior, including the people whose hands are dripping with blood in terms of creating the conditions that we are facing today. Let's look, for example, the crisis of unemployment. We were critical of President Beki. We said he's a neoliberal. We call him the 1996 class project leader, all manner of labels. But the record says that under his leadership, unemployment using the narrow definition was sitting at 25% when he took over in 1999, and it went down to 22% by the time he left in 2009. That was some modest improvement. We were not happy. We were agitating. We said that he should be removed. Our men took over. The man we claimed was a darling of a social progress, of a socialism, of a progressive thinking, and he was going to shift the ANC and the government to the left. But unemployment increased then from that 22% to 28%, and then to 30%. Under Ramaphosa, it went to 32% using the narrow definition. But using the expanded definition, unemployment worsened from 28% under President Beki to towards the 40% under President Zuma. Using that measure alone, by the way, we are representing workers. To us, the only measure to measure the success of any government, it has to be the creation of decent work, because only through decent work will we improve the living standards of workers. Will we disclose the yearning gap that has made South Africa the most unequal society in the world? And so using that measure, unfortunately, the ANC under under President Zuma, simply failed the working class, failed the poor. I don't know how people then think that the President Zuma, having failed for almost 10 years, will suddenly, when he's 82, with this record, change the situation around, be a darling of the poor again, when he failed the poor so badly economically, when he made the in terms of economy, the best beneficiaries of economic transformation to be the same people who were benefiting from the apartheid system. He too, like the rest of the ANC, must be held accountable for that. But still, Stephen, I once said to myself and watching the South African politics, that in South Africa, even the devil, if the devil was to walk in the streets with the horns and the tail, he will be followed by loads and loads of people who say, yes, our savior.
Surinzima Vavi, thank you. General Secretary of the South African Federation of Trade Unions. Strong views there. 27 minutes after 7.
Introducing a collection of Audi Black and Urban Special Edition models crafted for the bold and curated for the progressive. From the sporty Audi S3 and elegant A4 to the distinctive Q2 and Q3, each vehicle has been created to be an extension of your identity. Style, design, comfort, and technology is yours to own with a guaranteed future value and a competitive monthly installment through Audi Financial Services. Visit audi.co.za to discover more.
Greetings, fellow South Africans. I am Ronald Lamula, Minister of Justice and Correctional Services. South Africa celebrates 30 years of constitutional democracy and human rights this year. As we reflect on this significant milestone, the Department of Justice and Constitutional Development is convening a national conference to assess progress and chart the way forward in advancing human rights since 1994. This will be hosted from the 18th to the 20th of March 2024, with the 21st of March 2024 dedicated related to the commemoration of the National Human Rights Day. The conference will gather key stakeholders from government, civil society, academia, as well as international delegates to discuss under the theme 3 decades of respect for and promotion of human rights. We will emerge from the conference with recommendations that will inform our collective effort towards a future where a human rights culture is ingrained. Follow the conference in the media and our platforms to play your part in moving our country forward. I thank you.
This is SAFM Sport with Zai Khan.
Zai, good morning. The Nedbank Cup last 8.
Yeah, they're building up to a blockbuster finale over the weekend. 16 teams, and we're down to 8. Amatax are through, so is Amazulu, Stellenbosch FC, Orlando Pirates proving their title credentials. They beat Hungry Lions 4-0. Chipper United as well as Supersport United are through, and TS Galaxy yesterday out-muscling De General 3-0, while Mamelodi Sundowns, well, they are looking good. They needed 2 goals though by Temukosi Lodge to book their ticket. The draw will take place at 6 p.m. tonight. Elsewhere, Eric Ten Hag believes yesterday's 4-3 extra time win over Liverpool in the quarterfinals of the FA Cup could be a springboard that will help his Manchester United side achieve amazing things in the future.
I decided by the end to go one-on-one from the back. I saw we are physical strong, we are mentally strong. I had to force them more to go forward and force the team that they go one-on-one, and then they are forced to help each other. But when you don't do it, then a good team like Liverpool is will absolutely outplay you. And from that moment on, we got the initiative back in the game, and we created many chances from that point.
Meanwhile, Chelsea reached the FA Cup semi-finals following a 4-2 win at home to the championship leaders Leicester City. Tennis Iga Swiatek said she was super proud of her performance after coasting to victory over Maria Sakkari to win the BNP Paribas Open final in Indian Wells yesterday.
Really pleased, I'm super proud of my performance today. For sure, it was a test, of my mental training, because it's not easy to lead in the final like that and then keep going. So I'm happy that I focused on the right things, and I also improved some stuff that I thought, I did wrong in the middle of this first set. So it was all pretty nice to, feel that feeling at the end.
And finally, Carlos Alcaraz beat Daniel Medvedev in the men's draw for a second straight PNB Paribas Open final, earning his first title since winning Wimbledon last year. More sport at the top of the hour. I'm Zai Khan.
Zai, thanks very much indeed. Well, more expert analysis on the situation with Joburg's water in the next little while. You're with SFM leading the conversation. Stage 2 now. Stage 2 later is the forecast at 7:30.
And in the headlines, President Cyril Ramaphosa will this morning address the National Conference on the State of Human Rights in Boksburg, east of Johannesburg, marking the 30th anniversary of the country's constitutional democracy. The conference will be hosted by the Department of Justice and Constitutional Development under the theme 3 Decades of Respect for and Promotion of Human Rights. In other news, a new witness is expected to be called to the stand when the Senzo Meyiwa murder trial resumes this morning. On Friday, 2 confession statements allegedly made by accused number 1 and 2 revealed that singer Kelly Khumalo allegedly ordered the hit. Meyiwa was shot and killed in 2014 while at Khumalo's parental home in Vosloorus on Gauteng's East Rand. And a new female suspect arrested over the weekend is expected to appear in the Vredenburg Magistrates Court today in connection with the disappearance of 6-year-old Jocelyn Smith from Saldanha Bay. Details on these and other stories at the top of the hour.
SAFM, guiding you through the rush hour traffic.
Update on the Deepcliff protest situation. The M1 North coming up from Devlin Eldo, that's largely eased after police arrived there early. But what we're looking at now is some very heavy traffic on the N12 from Uncle Charlie's moving into the Deepcliff interchange for connections onto the M1. So it looks like the protesting now affecting that section of the N12. You might want to avoid that or travel through a little bit later once authorities have that under control. The N1 moving out of Soweto quite heavy up towards Gordon Road territory this morning. N1 south through Midrand, fairly chock-a-block between Brockfontein and New Road. Make sure you get a bit of extra time to get through that. Load shedding in the Monument Park area. So the R21's quite heavy both directions. The N4 into Pretoria this morning. Big backlogs from Watermeyer again down towards the M1 highway. And this crash around the Montana area causing major disruption. It's a collision on the M1 South between Sefako-Makato and Stormful Road. Traffic's all the way back to the N4 Duranport Plaza. That's where you'll queue from there on the N4 all the way down to the crash scene. Montana exiting on Sefako-Makato or coming across on the road from Moloto Road's very heavy, and Baviansport Road that takes you off Sefako-Makato down through Deerdeport on the alternative, very parallel to the N1's very heavy backlogs with diverting pressures as well. Durban bound, the N2 coming in off the south coast. A busy Monday, 20 Hill to Prospectons queuing. A crash right at the top of Fields Hill this morning, still causing big backlogs from the Hillcrest side, moving very slow down in through the Kloof area towards that sea. Cape Town's R300 is exceptionally busy today, queuing up from the Delft area all the way through to the Van Riebeeck Road exit to Stickland area. M5's at Ottery and the main road jamming both ways into Clovelly. It's particularly heavy Muizenberg, St James, Cork Bay side going south towards Fishoka. Big pile of traffic to work through there. Rob Byrne, SAFM Traffic.
The business update on SAFM.
Ray Machlaka, good morning again. Asian markets, US markets, how are they looking?
Well, it is Asian markets that are up and leading with gains. Investors are reacting to economic data showing how China's economy performed in January and February this year. Retail sales in the first 2 months of 2024 in China grew by 5.5%, and industrial output during the period increased by 7%. Investors are hoping that this is the start of China's economic recovery. So in Asian markets, China's Shanghai Composite is up 0.5%, Japan's Nikkei is up 2.3%, and Hong Kong's Hang Seng is up 0.2%. Before the US market opens later today, the US futures market is up. Nasdaq, Dow Jones, and S&P futures are each up 0.3%. And in the currency market, there is some weakness in the dollar against the rand. The local currency is 18.75.
And then Lesetja Kganyago, a third 5-year term as Reserve Bank governor. So what's that, all the way through until 2029?
That's right, and President Cyril Ramaphosa has reappointed Lesetja Kganyago as the Reserve Bank governor for another 5-year-long term. Kganyago's current second term as the governor expires in November this year. He has agreed to stay on for another term. There have also been other reappointments and new appointments at the Reserve Bank. Deputy Governors Rashad Kasim and Fundi Chatsibana have been reappointed for 5 years from September this year. And the Deputy Governor post, which has been vacant since Kuben Naidu left, is now filled by former National Treasury Deputy Director General Mampo Modise. The appointments have been largely welcome for bringing in stability in the Reserve Bank's leadership, even beyond the upcoming general election.
And then Transnet's preparing to allow third-party access to the rail network. I mean, this is finally going to happen?
Yeah, from April this year, Transnet plans to open up its rail network that spans 21,000 kilometers to the private sector. Transnet will start a process that will see private sector players buying rail slots so that they can independently run trains on Transnet's rail network. The private sector players will not only independently run trains, but they will also be required to invest in Transnet's rail infrastructure. Transnet requires investments worth at least 30 billion rand for the maintenance, investment and expansion of its rail network, and it is hoped that the private sector players will carry this cost.
Ray Machlaka, thank you very much indeed. Do appreciate it. Lots of conversations around sort of the private sector at the moment. 22 minutes now to 8.
Call us on 086 000 2032.
Cabello on the line from Durban. Cabello, if you're the Cabello, I think you might be. I wondered if we would hear from you this morning.
How are you? How are you, SG?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm good. Go for it. Zwelithini Mavavi and Zuma.
I think the man is confused, man.
You're still supporting Zuma?
100%. I support his ideology, by the way. I don't support him personally.
Okay.
Look, I think Zwelithini Mavavi is confused. Now, if he says Zuma let down the working class, is lying. Because under Zuma, public servant, ask the police, ask the municipality, ask the government people, when did they last got the decent increase? That's number one. Number two, when he says when Zuma took over, the the employment rate was 28%. Then Zuma took it to 40%, which is lying. Then he says Cyril Ramaphosa took it to 32%. So now his figures are even not corresponding. The person that led the working class down is his wife, his trucking company here in Katowice, where he employed 90% of the foreigners. Then he let down the working class. He must go and check himself. That's number one.
His wife working trucking, really?
Yeah, they got a truck. You must look at Manganiza company here in Katowice. His wife is transporting, I don't know what day, in Manganiza, in Katowice. Now, number two, let me read, because I got an opportunity now.
Yeah.
Thabo Mbeki as well. Thabo Mbeki, he talks the wrong things about, even Governor Mbeki, his father, he did not want him to be president because Thabo Mbeki sold us in London. Now he comes here and talk about Zuma this, Zuma that, Zuma that. Thabo Mbeki killed more than 300 people with that HIV thing.
Sure.
So now we mustn't come here and talk bad about Zuma. Then lastly, Stephen, Makhumalo, who is Zuma's wife, she's not a billionaire, but Thabo Mbeki's wife, Zanele Mbeki, she's a billionaire. Where did she got money?
Cabello, I don't think I know of no evidence or nothing that suggests that Zanele Mbeki is.
I am telling you, she's the chair of all the companies, FNB, all these mining companies.
Cabello,
that's money.
Cabello, I'll happily go and check, but that's not my understanding. I mean, I did allow you to speak there at some length, so I'm going to move on. I don't know if that's necessarily true. I don't think it is at this stage. KB on the line from Umsunduzi, Pietermaritzburg. KB, hi, Zuma and Vavi.
How are you?
Yeah, I'm well, KB. Go for it.
Yes, I think Zwelithini Mavavi is right, correctly right. There's only one person that's missing to come and comment to, Julius Malema, who endorsed Jacob Zuma.
Yeah.
Yeah, whatever he's saying is right. It's correctly right. Because Zuma, he collapsed the country. But many people doesn't see that. They see him as a hero. But like, with the truth that Vavi is saying, they were behind Zuma to be in power. So he's telling the truth as it is. The only person that's missing to come out is Julius Malema.
All right, thank you. KB on the line from Pietermaritzburg. Kasif on the line from Cape Town. The issue around privatization. Hi.
Good day, Steve. Good morning. This is Kasia. We become president of the Producer Professionals Forum calling from Cape Town.
Oh, yes. Hello, Kasif. Yes.
Very well. The issue of privatization, I prefer to call it co-ownership, Stephen. There are 736 SOEs in South Africa. Now, if you take SAA as an example, South African Airways, there are only about 20-odd wholly owned airlines, wholly owned by the state airlines globally.
Yeah.
Now, the challenge with SAA, for example, using SAA as an example, if SAA wants to introduce a new flight from here to Ghana, it requires it to go to the Portfolio Committee of Transport or Public Enterprises to table its business plan. By the time the debate is done, the competitor has gotten onto SSE's strategic objectives and duplicates it.
And we saw what Malusi Gigaba did. I mean, I've read again an account of that meeting, and then we heard the testimony at the Zondo Commission, where he basically allowed members of an Indian airline, Friends of the Guptas, to just completely criticize and humiliate the CEO of SAA at the time.
This is the point. So I think when the South African public argues about co-ownership or privatization, we must look at it globally. Now, if you take the Singaporean model of SOEs, they've got an SOE holding company, which, by the way, the President Ramaphosa announced in his State of the Nation this 2022 about establishing this holding company in order to have co-ownership, because we need to have experts from the private sector run this SOEs firstly. Secondly, even if we want to maintain 100% ownership of SOEs, our country and our fiscus cannot afford it.
Yeah. No, all right, Kasif. I mean, look, there's a lot to it. Co-ownership, that's sort of the word that I take from that. I don't know if it'll work out. Z on the line from Cape Town also on this issue of the private sector.
Morning, Stephen. Similar comments, but I think there's something a bit more poisonous and glib that's sort of dropped into the way we process these things. So the first question we should be asking is, how do we jump automatically from ignoring the past into the future and then ignoring what are we doing in the middle with either recovery, number one, or number two, affirmation that the state still has the potential, either on a co-ownership basis or on a facilitated basis, to have anything to do with these enterprises. Because if the answer to both of those questions is no, then the outcome must be that the state must get the heck out of ownership, operation, or any kind of influence or enablement in relation to those enterprises. So that's the one point. The second point is, if we agree that that's where it's going to go, or even if it goes on a diluted basis, surely we must see a reduction in our taxes, because our taxes are partly meant to fund that. And the final point that ties into that is that we should presumably also see a shrinkage of cabinet and all of the ministries and of the departments that underpin and support these enterprises. So I think all I'm saying is, when we hear this conversation, let's not just jump to the end point. Let's examine and interrogate. And I would ask you to do the same when people mention that in your interviews.
All right, Z on the line from Cape Town. Important points. Thank you. Subtle points too, but important points. 16 minutes now to 8.
Those who love the beautiful game can never have enough of the incredible moments, like the fascinating last-minute goals, the unbelievable saves, the top-of-the-range reviews of critical match scenarios by the legendary Mr. Ref, the mummies of the week, and highly knowledgeable analysts. Catch Soccer Zone on Mondays at 8 p.m, live on SABC Sport on DTT Channel 4 and SABC 1 at 10 p.m. Also available on SABC Plus and SABCSport.com. #We love it here. Proudly brought to you by SABC Sport.
For the love of the game.
Friend, yes? I nearly fainted when I read somewhere that the GEPF's minimum funding level is at 72%.
Really?
Only to realize that it was in 1996 when the GEPF was founded.
Okay.
I just saw my pension going.
You like drama, hey friend? Sure.
We've come a long way. GEPF's minimum funding level is at 110.1%. This means that the GEPF has R1.10 for every R1 it owes its retiring members. GEPF members are more than covered when they retire with the GEPF. Tomorrow shouldn't be a worry when today is done right. GEPF, your investment, your future.
Blow your mind, not your paycheck, with real savings, just like 35-year-old Danica, who jumped for joy when she saved 38% by only paying R749 per month on her silver grey 2018 Haval H2 1.5T luxury. Why don't you see if you could save on your car insurance? SMS out to 30754 to get a quote. That's out to 30754 now. A licensed insurer and FSP. Premiums are risk profile dependent and reviewed annually. T's and C's apply.
Across South Africa, online and on radio. SAFM, let's talk.
14 minutes to 8. Well, still major water problems this morning in some parts of Joburg, some parts of Soweto too, and surrounding areas. There are warnings. The problems we've seen could be the start of a sort of new phase of the collapse of water systems. In other words, this could really be the beginning of sort of, I suppose, water shedding in some words. Professor Anthony Turtons at the Centre for Environmental Management at the University of the Free State and specialist in water. Anthony, good morning. Thanks for your time.
Good morning to you and the listeners.
Why do you believe these water failures could start to accelerate? Maybe cascade's a better word.
Yes, because water systems are designed to always operate under pressure. And the reason is quite simple. I mean, it's an engineering issue, but pipes, when they are under pressure, they swell up, they get slightly fatter and shorter. than when they are not under pressure. So each time you change the pressure regime under which you run the system, you alter all the bits and pieces, all the components in the system. And you must remember that there are thousands and thousands of leaks in the system, and many of those leaks have just been temporarily repaired. And the way they do a temporary repair is they simply put a patch of rubber over the hole, and then they tie that down with a metal strap. So in other words, it's a swelling of the pipe that holds the rubber in place onto the strap, because the strap doesn't stretch. So as soon as you release the pressure now, then suddenly all of those straps come loose and you start springing leaks again. So once that starts happening, you typically see an acceleration of failures. So if you had to count the number of failures over each one of those pressure cycles, you would start getting more and more over a period of time. So it's really not a good thing. This whole water shifting idea, in my view, is actually not the best of policies at all, because it's got unintended consequences.
Is it possible to stop this from happening? I mean, people are doing this because they're desperate to get reservoirs filled, because communities are shouting and screaming for water.
Honestly, that's the thing. You're literally on the horns of a dilemma now. And, the bottom line is that demand for water in the Gauteng area is outstripping supply. So the reservoirs that are in the system are running dry. That's what it means. Now, we can drill down into what the actual cause of that is. Is it Rand Water's failure? Is it City of Johannesburg's failure? And it's not just one thing. It's a whole bunch of things. But, on the one hand, I would say the biggest single cause of this thing is the fact that approximately 45% of the water that goes into the system is lost to leaks. So the more that Rand Water puts into the leaking system, the more comes out the other side, and people still don't have water. So I would say that the priority must be to fix leaks rather than to shift water around. But of course, that's easy to say with sitting in an armchair somewhere remote from the battle line, because the battle line is actually going to be when people start getting angry and start taking to the streets. So that's what this is an attempt to do, and that's why I believe that this water shifting is in fact an empirical indicator that we have transitioned now to a completely new phase. And that new phase is about inherent instability of the system, trying to keep it afloat as best we can on the one hand, but at the same time seeing accelerated failure on the other.
All of this is going to have huge consequences. Can it be averted? I mean, is there anything? I mean, I realize that yes, people could stop water shifting now, but it requires a huge amount of maintenance. We've seen the Water Affairs Minister, Senator Mkhunu, I think, pushing, and it's actually in the ANC election manifesto I noticed, pushing for a bigger role for national government in the provision of water. Will those things help?
You see, we can learn from lessons again. So let's look at South Africa. Let's look at 2018, 2019, when Cape Town had day zero. Cape Town was in dire straits at that point in time, and the city of Cape Town took a lot of criticism, and also, as with now in Gauteng, and lots of complexities underneath it. But now, if we fast forward to today, Cape Town has now come up with a comprehensive strategy, an extremely sophisticated strategy that is doable, it is investable, it's bankable, people are willing to support it, and they're now turning the thing around. But it's taken them a good couple of years to do it, but more importantly, they've got a credible plan, and it's driven by technically competent people. So I would say that that's what we have to start doing now. So, the first thing to do in Gauteng is to simply try and stabilize the system and prevent it deteriorating any further. But then what we're going to have to do is start coming out with a new vision for an improvement. And I would say that probably one of the early stages of that new vision for an improvement would be to digitize the system, and particularly the Rand Water system, because it's the most comprehensive in the country. And there are technologies out there today. We're living in the modern world, the digital world, the world of Internet of Things, etc. It's very simple to digitize that in phases, so that there's a real-time information flowing across the system, but more importantly, that you've got built-in artificial intelligence that enables you to create diagnostics, so you can get ahead of the curve. So this, I think, is as an absolute minimum, this is what we have to start doing. It's absolutely bizarre to think of an economy as sophisticated as that of Gauteng, that produces 60% of the economic activity of the country and houses 1/3 of the total national population, and yet we're still running on a manual system. There's no digitization in that system. It's in fact, we've only got one supplier, So we are so vulnerable if that one supplier goes down, and this is simply untenable. We have to really catch a wake up call, if we're going to turn the ship around in the long term.
Professor Anthony Turton, thank you, water specialist at University of the Free State. Really appreciate it. 8 minutes to 8.
SAFM, guiding you through the rush hour traffic.
Major delays around Montana this morning. It's been our top story. The N1 South, an earlier big crash scene between Sefaka Makato and Stormful Road has traffic all the way back to the N4 Durham-Port Plaza. You'll get to the plaza, and that's where you'll stop on the N4 East, and then all the way onto the N1, all the way through Sefaka Makato and halfway down to Stormful. It's major. You want to try and avoid that. Sefaka Makato coming out of Montana is heavy to the highway, and there's a lot of backlogging on Baviansport Road, the local alternative around that. The N4 into Pretoria is still being asked to queue up through towards the N1, that queue back through to Rousseau Street, Murrayfield area. The R21 slow at Monument Park both ways. That's some load shedding wrapping up at 8 o'clock this morning, but it has left some delays. The N1 South, Brackfontein to New Road stays very heavily backed up. Vickers Road, City Deep area closed because of a major crash between Heidelberg Road and the M2. You want to avoid that. You'll probably, if you're on it, just be turned back a major crash, multiple injuries on Vickers Road. And the N12 now, queuing to Deepcliff, a queue that almost is back as far as Xavier Street. There's been some protest-related disruption around the Deepcliff interchange. The N1 seems to be okay, but it's that N12 direction Soweto that's really bad. Crash between Tweedy Hill and Prospectum this morning. The N2 leaving the south coast stays heavy. There's also been a crash going out of Durban on the N3 through the roadworks near Paradise Valley. It's been cleared, but it's left a backlog of traffic. M13, Hillcrest to Kloof onto Fields Hill, busy after an earlier crash scene there. Cape Town, the R300, very slow going from Delft Road, Hindle, all the way through to Van Riebeek Road. Stationary truck stuck on the M1 inbound before Plattercliff Road, so there's certainly some delays there. And if you're driving into Stellenbosch, just watch for a crash just going up in the Jamestown area. That's likely to have an impact as you arrive into that area from Somerset West. Rob Byrne, SAFM Traffic.
First in the morning, SAFM Sunrise with Stephen Grootes.
6 minutes to 8 the time. Well, a horrible situation in the city of Cape Town over the weekend, sort of yesterday morning. An informal settlement in Philippi, really having a big fire there. Over 100 shacks destroyed, 400 people displaced. Jermaine Carlse is the spokesperson for the City of Cape Town Fire and Rescue Services. Jermaine, good morning.
Good morning, Stephen, to you and your listeners.
How bad was it? What's the situation this morning?
Yeah, I think there was a horrendous situation in the morning. The fire was fanned by a very strong wind, and eventually there was 117. I think the total went up because informal settlement management as well as disaster risk management went out post the fire incident to obviously get the tallies of the people that were displaced. And it's far over 117, and I think it's 404 persons that were displaced yesterday morning.
We know it can be very difficult to fight a fire in an informal settlement. Often there aren't hydrants there, you can't connect your hoses to anything. You also can't get your trucks, your fire engines in the right place. Is this a problem that you often see in fires like this?
Yeah, certain areas and certain informal settlements where access is limited. Luckily, this was in Philippi East in Bubu Street, where there were obviously access roads leading into the settlement itself. And obviously, with Cape Town having enough resources, we called upon more resources to assist. The fire was contained, and it could have been worse if we had not had any more resources on scene.
We're going into winter. Obviously, people will be using stoves for longer, whatever they can do to heat themselves. Very difficult, gets very cold in some places, perhaps not quite so much in the Western Cape as it does in the interior of the country. Are you worried it might be quite a difficult winter for you?
Well, we normally have our education awareness programs throughout the year, and obviously we'll ramp it up during the course of the winter season. And there is strategic areas that we do target, especially in winters, the informal settlements. We work with the disaster risk management, informal settlement management, as well as 107, so that we can get the message across to the various residents where we know these fires can get out of hand.
Jermaine Carlse, appreciate the time. Thank you. Spokesperson for the City of Cape Town Fire and Rescue Services. 3 minutes now to 8.
Call us on 086 000 2032.
Lesiba on the line from Khobakwani. Lesiba, good morning. Lots of people talking about Zwelinzima Mavavi. You want to talk about the elections this morning?
Yes. Good morning, Stephen, and good morning to our producer, Levo, and the listeners in general. You see, Stephen, myself personally, Lesiba, I must confess that I'm getting, as the election gets closer and closer, can be as
Lesiba, I can't hear you. Lesiba, can.
Yes.
All right, Lesiba, we're going to come back to you. Maybe you can move around for us, and let's see if we are able to hear you. Denzel on the line from Kimberley. You've been on hold for a long time. Zulinzima Vavi, his comments about former President Zuma. What do you think, Denzel?
Good morning, Stephen. Stephen, I want to ask Zulinzima a question. This thing of ESCOM didn't start in 2024. It started in 2004 when the ANC was won. That comes out of the former president's mouth, Mr. Mbeki.
Yeah.
Now, they were a tripartite alliance. Zulinzima Vavi's talk was in COSATU and was correct. Why didn't he? The SACP warned the ANC to wake up and listen to their advice that the grid will collapse. In 2007, we had our first experience of load shedding. Where was Zulinzima Vavi? Why didn't he mobilize the people and go to the streets? In 2008, Mbeki mentioned it in Parliament. He apologized. Where was Zulinzima Vavi? Let me tell you, Stephen, these politicians, they undermine us. They undermine all South Africans. We as South Africans, let me tell them if they are listening now. Politicians, we as South Africa, we as South Africans, we are like phyllo pastry. We have many layers. You will never get us done. Let me tell you straight. Zuma was there when there was one, and I'm only mentioning ESCOM. Zuma was there, all of them. The tripartite alliance, all of them, but they were busy. Zulinzima was busy in the office with his colleague, or he was sucking up to the ANC. They did not hold each other accountable. This thing is all about oversight, accountability. That's why the managers at ESCOM get that chance to loot ESCOM.
All right.
Because the ANC didn't do their job, and Mbeki didn't do his job. It's not just Zuma alone. Zuma was in. He was in. Rightfully so. But all of them, and I would like them to talk, Stephen. Keep on talking. We love it. Thank you, Stephen.
All right, Denzel on the line from Kimberley. Thank you. I can hear your enthusiasm. I think he's sort of looking forward to the elections and what happens after that, and it's going to be an interesting ride. All right, more to come. We'll talk more about what happened in KwaZulu-Natal over the weekend, and quite a sort of important situation. Siboniso Duma and the traditional Zulu Prime Minister Thulisizwe Buthelezi. I've never seen anything like that before. We'll talk more about that in the next little while. You with SFM leading the conversation. Good morning. It's 8 o'clock.
And impartial. This is SAFM News.
In top stories this hour, spotlight on state of human rights in the country, and Israel targets Al-Shifa Hospital in Gaza. Good morning. President Cyril Ramaphosa will this morning address the National Conference on the State of Human Rights in Boksburg, east of Johannesburg, marking the 30th anniversary of the country's constitutional democracy. The conference will be hosted by the Department of Justice and Constitutional Development under the theme 3 Decades of Respect for and Promotion of Human Rights. The conference will provide an opportunity to unpack the hurdles that have impacted the progress towards the realization of human rights. Spokesperson for the department, Crispin Peary, explains the significance of the conference.
This year marks the 30th anniversary of our democracy. And so this conference sitting at this time of the year enables us to really look at how far we've come as a democracy, particularly along the respect for human rights. South Africa, of course, having its history, a turbulent history with human rights, but also having a progressive history of having the most advanced constitution in the world. This conference will really delve into the aspect of human rights, how far we have come, and what more we need to do to deepen a human rights culture.
And in election-related news, ANC President Cyril Ramaphosa has emphasized the need for political tolerance. This follows an alleged attack on some ANC members at a government event in Kwaqeza in Nongoma, northern KwaZulu-Natal, on Saturday. A statement by the party alleges that the attack was carried out by IFP members. However, the IFP in Ulundi has denied the allegation. The alleged attack also follows political tensions that played out between provincial ANC leader Siboniso Duma and AmaZulu traditional Prime Minister Reverend Thulasizwe Buthelezi at the podium of the same event. Ramaphosa visited communities on the KwaZulu-Natal South Coast on an election campaign over the weekend. He appealed for tolerance and respect among political parties.
Leaders of various political parties to call on their members to desist from using violence, even articulating violence-ridden statements. That should not be happening at all, because we want our people to be free to make their own choices. What happened yesterday, most unfortunate, and we're totally against it. We are investigating it, and the police are also looking into it. And as I've said often, those who try to take our democracy for granted and try and even destroy it, there will be consequences.
EFF leader Julius Malema has decried what he called shambolic state of municipalities in the Free State. Addressing party members and supporters at the EFF's provincial manifesto launch in Sasolburg, Malema said not a single municipality in the province can produce a clean audit outcome based on the Auditor General's report. He also took a swipe at the Free State Premier Mxolisi Dukwana, accusing him of failing to improve municipalities while he was still MEC for cooperative governance.
When the municipalities were collapsing and when the municipalities were not getting a clean audit, Dukwan was MEC of Kokta. Today, Dukwan, who collapsed the municipalities of Free State, got a promotion and they made him the premier. Because in the ANC, when you are lazy and corrupt, they give you a promotion. They don't want honest people, they want criminals.
A new witness is expected to be called to the stand when the Senzo Meyiwa murder trial resumes this morning. On Friday, 2 confession statements allegedly made by accused number 1 and 2 revealed that singer Kelly Khumalo allegedly ordered the hit. Meyiwa was shot and killed in 2014 while at Khumalo's parental home in Vosloorus on Gauteng's East Rand. 5 men are on trial at the High Court in Pretoria for the murder of the former Orlando Pirates and Bafana Bafana captain. Paul Makubani has more details.
In the statement, Ntanzi was paid 45,000 rand for the job. Police officer Nhlanganyelwa Moto was also called to testify about a confession statement made by accused number 1, Muzi Sibiya. Sibiya also implicates singer Kelly Khumalo, but Sibiya's statement also mentions name on some suspects who are not in court. According to the statement, it was Sibiya's friends from the Vosloorus hostel, Marco Buthelezi and Makambi Buthelezi, that shot and killed Meyiwa. It's alleged Sibiya received 30,000 rand for the contract killing, while a traditional healer was paid 5,000 rand. Marco has since died. The trial is expected to continue this morning.
A 38-year-old woman is expected to appear in the Vredenburg Magistrates Court today in connection with the disappearance of 6-year-old Jocelyn Smith from Saldanha Bay. She was arrested over the weekend. The search for the little girl, however, continues. The grade 1 learner went missing from her house in the Middle Post informal settlement almost a month ago. Last week, 3 accused, including the child's mother, appeared in court but abandoned their bail and will remain in custody until their next court appearance. And the Israeli military says it has launched what it calls a precise operation in parts of Al-Shifa hospital in the Gaza City. A military spokesperson, Admiral Daniel Hagari, said the IDF had learned that senior Hamas militants had regrouped inside the hospital and were using it as a command center to coordinate attacks against Israel.
Our targeted mission isn't just an operational necessity. It's a global imperative. Our forces have undergone specified training to prepare them for the sensitive environment and complex scenarios they may encounter. Our war is against Hamas, not against the people of Gaza. We seek no harm to the civilians that Hamas is hiding behind, which is why we will conduct this operation with caution and care.
Recapping our top story this hour, President Cyril Ramaphosa will this morning address the National Conference on the State of Human Rights in Boksburg, east of Johannesburg, marking the 30th anniversary of the country's constitutional democracy. I'll be back with the headlines at the bottom of the hour. For SFM News, I am Nomalizo Mandela.
A very good morning to you in your SFM Sports Headlines. Soccer, Bafana faced setbacks as Siyabonga Ngezana and Spepelo Sitole. They withdraw from the FIFA series matches. Meanwhile, in some netball news, the Spar Baby Proteas dominate. And that's at the World Cup qualifying campaign. Full details coming just before 8:30.
SAFM, guiding you through the rush hour traffic.
It's very heavy on the M1 South in Pretoria this morning from the N4 Durban Port Plaza all the way down to this earlier crash scene between Montana and the Stormfall exit. Local routes in the area, including the Sefaka Makato option out towards the M1 highway, stay very heavily backed as well. Queuing pressure into the Deep Cliff interchange and protesting that side today. The N12 is now backed all the way through to Xavier Street. So if you're coming from Alberton, you need to get towards Soweto or Bloemfontein or Potchefstroom. That southern bypass from Guildview in towards Deep Cliff via Southgate, very heavy. A lot of traffic on the N12, N3 option this morning as you route out of Alberton all the way through to Galuli East interchange. Durban, a little crash on the N2 a bit earlier this morning involving 3 vehicles between Tweeny Hill and Prospect, and so the N2 stays fairly busy as you come in off the south coast. Bit of queuing pressure at Marion Hill Plaza as well to note on your way to Durban. Cape Town, there's a bit of collision at Jamestown on the R44, having left Somerset West. There's a queue and a half moving into that scene on your way to Stellenbosch, and a breakdown stationary truck stuck on the N1 into town. Right lane obstructed by Plattercliff Road. That traffic stays heavy all the way back to Durban Road in the Belleville area. Rob Byrne, SAFM Traffic.
SAFM Sunrise. A vivid start to your day.
9 after 8, good morning, you with SAFM Sunrise. I'm Stephen Grootes. I don't know if you use TikTok. Half of Americans do, over 170 million. And last week, the US Congress voted to actually ban TikTok because it's owned by a company that is Chinese. And the sort of suspicion from the Americans is that this company is sort of giving data to the Chinese Communist Party or the Chinese government. India's also banned TikTok, by the way, so it's not just an American thing. We'll find out if there's really any basis for this kind of fear. Could it ever happen here, banning an app? I mean, does that happen? I'm not aware of an app being banned. Maybe it does, though. So we'll look at that in the next little while. Also, more on the IFP and the ANC in KwaZulu-Natal. Professor Bekim Gumazulu, we'll hear from him about this quite dramatic moment over the weekend, and sort of, unfortunately, gives us a sense of, some of the situations, some of the aspects of the situation in KZN. Good morning, 10 after 8.
Fly better to your next holiday. Book your flights with Emirates to a holiday in Dubai, London, Istanbul, or Paris. Look forward to delicious regionally inspired cuisine, enjoy free-flowing premium drinks, and relax to your favorite movies on the way. Because it's not just about the destination, it's how you get there. This year, fly Emirates. Fly better.
Public Works and Infrastructure Minister Sikhla Zikalala is proud to announce that the country will host Africa's largest sustainable infrastructure development symposiums, the SIDSA, from the 17th to the 19th of March at the Cape Town International Convention Centre, where President Cyril Ramaphosa will also deliver a keynote address. SIDSA highlights include the showcasing of progress in South Africa's infrastructure development plan as adopted by Cabinet, the unveiling of a pipeline of the top 12 infrastructure priorities for project preparation and funding for the 2024-2025 financial year, the launch of South Africa's construction book, as well as the new international partnerships and cooperations. Brought to you by Infrastructure South Africa, an entity of the Department of Public Works and Infrastructure, the South African government, leaving no one behind.
Stephen Grootes on SAFM.
11 minutes after 8 the time. Good morning. Well, quite a dramatic scene at a government event to mark the 110th anniversary of the passing of the Zulu king, Dinizulu Kaxwakayo, on Saturday. While the traditional prime minister to the Zulu king, Tulisizwe Buthelezi, was speaking, the leader of the ANC in the province, Siboniso Duma, snatched the microphone away from him and claimed that Buthelezi was trying to misuse a government event for politics. The ANC says 12 of its supporters were hurt in what was, I don't know, it might have been a scuffle, some kind of incident at the event. The IFP says they issued a strong statement yesterday. They said Duma was desecrating the Zulu monarch through these actions. Professor Bekim Gumazulu is director at the Centre for the Advancement of Non-Racialism and Democracy at Nelson Mandela University. Professor Gumazulu, good morning. Thanks for your time.
Good morning to Stephen and your team and your listeners. Don't worry, I'm not going to charge you for making me speak English in the morning.
So long as your English is already loaded so early.
Let's hope so. Let's hope so.
I've seen many things in our politics. I know you have seen more than I have, but I don't think I've ever seen someone from one party taking a microphone from another speaker during a government event before. What does this entire event tell us?
No, Stephen, on a serious note, we have all the reasons to be concerned. What happened at that particular event where we're commemorating the passing of the late King Dinuzulu, marking 110 years of his passing, was an unfortunate situation. And I do believe that all our leaders will come to their sober senses and make sure that something similar does not happen again. This was an embarrassment on many fronts. One, you have Thulasizwe Buthelezi, who is the traditional prime minister of the Zulu nation. And that then, of course, adds to his other portfolio as the mayor of Zululand in his capacity as a member and a leader of the Nkatha Freedom Party. So he's wearing those two caps. But the moment you ascend the podium wearing the hat of being the traditional prime minister of the Zulu nation, you forget your political affiliation, you leave it outside the venue, not outside the podium, outside the venue. Then you perform your duties as the traditional prime minister of the Zulu nation. On this occasion, Thulasizwe Buthelezi made a mistake. He was not supposed to include politics in an event of this nature. So that is one thing. But then, of course, when you come to Siboniso Duma, what he also did was totally wrong. It was unacceptable on many fronts too. One, by virtue of the fact that Thulasizwe Buthelezi was not speaking in his capacity as the mayor of Zululand, but in his capacity as traditional minister of the Zulu nation, it meant therefore that his identity was a different one. He was the spokesperson, basically. He was the face of the Zulu monarch, in this case, King Misuzulu. And the worst part of it, King Misuzulu was there, the president of the country was there. So which means therefore that from Duma's side, as a Zulu person, he pays allegiance to the Zulu king. He also, as a politician, he pays allegiance, or at least he's under the leadership of Honorable President Cyril Ramaphosa. So on both occasions, then there was no way that one would have done what he did. So what he did was totally wrong. I don't want to mince my words on that one. It was totally wrong.
We've always been concerned. You and I have had a conversation about the possibility of violence during these elections in KZN, and I think when you and I last spoke, we were perhaps more worried about violence between supporters of the ANC and supporters of the new Umkhonto we Sizwe party. I didn't think that we'd need to be that concerned about the ANC and the IFP.
Yes, we didn't see this one coming, and we had all the reasons not to be worried. Simply because we have had elections recently, and there was no fight between the IFP and the ANC, which I am one of the people who has appreciated that, because in fact, skirmishes between the ANC and the IFP should not arise. Being a member of the ANC is not a mistake, and it's not anybody's crime. And being a member of the IFP is not a mistake, and it's not anybody's crime. So people have a right to belong to all political parties as prescribed in the Constitution, section Chapter 2 of the Constitution of the country. So there is nothing wrong in being a member of any of these political parties. Where things go wrong is when politicians make reckless statements, wittingly or unwittingly so. They make reckless statements. What then happens is that some of their followers might misconstrue what they say. In other words, they might misinterpret what they say, and then they end up doing what you saw happening at Wateza, because a number of people got injured, and those people had nothing to do with what was happening on the podium. They were not on the stage. They didn't take a mic from anyone. They didn't say anything, but they ended up being victims, which then invokes the saying that when elephants fight, it is the grass that suffers. This is the situation we're facing. This is something that was not supposed to happen, and the fact that it has happened is regrettable. One can only hope that it doesn't repeat itself, because, as you say, KZN is a volatile province, and more especially this year, given that we have 115 political parties who have already met the deadline and they've paid the money that is needed by the IEC. We still have independent candidates. It means stakes are high, and therefore emotions are bound to rise, both in KwaZulu-Natal and in Gauteng. So therefore, politicians have to be extra careful this time around.
How important is it for leadership to calm tensions? I think President Ramaphosa already tried to do that. Maybe the IFP did as well. I might have missed that. But how important is it to have leaders on both sides or on all sides basically saying, look, everybody, take a breath?
Stephen, the point you are making is a valid one. Although then my take is, when you want to address a situation like this, you don't do it in the media. What you do as the leadership of the ANC, you call Siboniso Duma and everybody around him, the entire PEC for that matter, and then of course the leadership in the provincial government. You call them in a room and then you discuss with them this issue as a starting point, but then you address other issues as well in terms of what this could amount to or what it would spill over to. Once you contain that situation, the only time you talk to the media is when you go out there and make a joint statement. As the leadership of the organization, we've discussed this matter. This is what we've agreed to. The same should happen with the IFP. The leadership of the IFP should call their mayor of Zululand and discuss issues with him in his political capacity. As for the king, we cannot prescribe for the king what to do because, as I said, the king is not elected. He occupies that position by virtue of being born in the royal house. So then it's up to the king how he handles the issue of his traditional prime minister. But the IFP has a responsibility to have a meeting with Reverend Thula Sizwe Buthelezi in his capacity as the mayor of Zululand, a leader of the IFP and a member of the IFP, and discuss with him together with the leadership of the IFP in KwaZulu-Natal to indicate what this would amount to if left unattended to.
I suppose one of the other issues with this is that outside of an election, you can get the leaders of different political parties to speak together at an event. During the election, that can be a little harder.
It's not supposed to be harder for one reason. You have an event which is a government event, then it should be handled that way. If you have a political party rally, that's a different ball game altogether because it means that you can do what the party wants to do. You can organize artists, you can bring food, you can bring T-shirts, you can bring any other party regalia if it is a party event. But the moment you have a government event, then you should handle it as a government event, which means anyone is allowed to be part of that event regardless of political affiliation, even people who are not necessarily members of any political party. By virtue of them being South Africans, they do have the right to attend a government event. But if it's a party event, you handle it differently.
Professor, thank you so much. Professor Bekim Gomazulu is Director at the Centre for the Advancement of Non-Racialism and Democracy at Nelson Mandela University.
Call us on 086 000 2032.
Tuyani in the Western Cape. Hi, what's happened to you?
Stephen, how are you?
I'm well. Go for it.
You know, my heart is so paining. I work with some security guards here at the capital in Lanebeck.
Yeah.
In one of the wind farm, it's IPP for ESCOM.
Yeah.
You know, the security guards here, they are mistreated by their company. The top management is mistreating them every month. They only get paid when it feels like paying them.
Sure.
And last week, this security company, the Capital Security Company, it came here at work. It threatens them that if next time they don't pitch for work, he will fire them. He made them to sign a nonsensical warning that if they don't pitch, they won't be paid, and he will fire them. As this, they don't even have. When they say they want to go to a union, he threatens them that he will fire them as well. I don't know how can I help these people, or who can help these people. I put it on the ombudsman, on security ombudsman, to help the security people who are working for capital security.
Tiani, I think this is something where a union really would have to get involved. They would know how to approach something like this. I wouldn't be able to do much more, but I think that would probably be the way forward. How many people are affected by this?
I think it's 16 of them.
Okay.
It's 16 people. And it pains me because they skipped a month without being paid, and only 3 days that they didn't come to work is threatening of firing them.
So does the person still owe them money?
He still owes them money, and they're working odd shifts. If this one didn't come, the next person is forced to come to work or to continue with the other person's shift, or else they would be fired.
All right. Tiani, I'm going to take your number if that's all right. I'm not going to promise anything. You know how we are. But let's see if we are able to do something. I think that really a union, maybe if a union wants to get involved and is hearing Tiani, maybe it would be a good idea to sort of go that route. Tiani, very sad to hear that. Thank you. Is it Chaba or Chaka on the line from Mpumalanga? Hi, on KwaZulu-Natal.
Hi, my name is Chaba.
Chaba. All right. Sorry about that, Chaba. Go for it.
From Mpumalanga, I would like to discuss or to make input in relation to the current policy.
Quickly, if you can, please, Chaba.
Yes, one, I think we have trusted untrustworthy people. And as a result, we find ourselves in a situation wherein decisions are taken and are not informed by facts, and capable people are not given an opportunity.
Right, Chaba, we seem to have lost you there. I'm sorry about that. On the line from Mpumalanga. Chaba, I think maybe if you call in tomorrow and we'll give you time to finish your point. I'm sorry about that. 23 minutes now after 8.
Stephen Grootes on SAFM.
So, can I ask you this question? Who do you let look at your phone messages? When my wife is bored, she sometimes goes through my WhatsApp messages, throws the phone back at me because, according to her, I live a very boring life. Do you go through your child's messages? So then how do you make sure, and I'm sure you don't let almost anyone look at your messages, that's because you want to keep them secret. How do you do that? William Bird is Executive Director at Media Monitoring Africa. William, good morning.
Hi, good morning, Stephen. Thanks for having me on the program.
Sure, lots of different ways to kind of keep your messages secret. Some people use WhatsApp. It's very hard to get into WhatsApp, almost impossible. Telegram is another, and Signal. Which ones are the most effective? Everyone talks about Signal for this kind of messaging.
Yeah, look, it depends on why. I mean, if someone's got access to your device and they've opened it either using your face recognition or your passcode, they usually can get into those things. You can put a further kind of pass lock on some of those particular apps, but once they have access to that, they can probably then open and read your messages. And I mean, that's usually, hopefully, only family and friends that are going to have access to that kind of device. I mean, sometimes these things rarely get access. If someone decides to steal your phone, then they can probably get access, but usually that's to take the money and not necessarily read your messaging. But generally speaking, as if you are outside of that circle, so I wouldn't be able to read your messages without having your device in my hand. I mean, there are some very sophisticated devices that do allow you to kind of try and intercept some of those things. And there are arguments about the degree to which they're able to do that. And then, of course, governments are able to request information, but that's quite a different thing from a personal use point of view.
A lot of people, they sort of say, well, government should never be allowed to see my information, and I understand that. But should it always be that no one from government should ever be able to hack into a phone? I'm thinking about, it's the classic sort of dilemma, really, police investigating a crime or a kidnapping or something like that. And we've seen debates around this in the States primarily.
Well, I mean, there was a very big case around that in South Africa, around the RICO legislation, which was then found to be completely unconstitutional on that basis. So, of course, in general terms, you don't want the government being able to intercept and listen to your messages or even get basic data around them. So, at the moment, for example, it's if government want access to your WhatsApp messaging, what they can do is they can get access to the metadata. In other words, they can find out who have you been, what numbers have you been sending messages to, how often have you sent them, when do you send them, all those kinds of things. That can be useful if they're looking to place you at the scene of a crime without even knowing whether you were there or not. So you can imagine if they say, William was responsible with Stephen for coordinating a robbery, and they look at our metadata and they see that, yes, a few minutes before and in the days leading up to it, we had lots of those calls. But generally, if they want to actually intercept the content of your messages, then they'd need to show good cause. And so we usually have a good judicial position that says you have to go before a judge, you have to make a case out for why you want to do this, and it must be clearly and it means that you can't otherwise do. So if there's someone that's running a trafficking ring or someone that's going to commit serious crime, then you'd want to say that the police should be able to intercept that so that they can hopefully prevent those kinds of crimes happening. But these things are balanced, and of course what tends to happen is that a lot of those systems tend to be abused, as we saw in South Africa, where the state security services monitored some of the journalists from Amabungani as an example, and that was shown to be unconstitutional.
William Bird, thank you. Executive Director at Media Monitoring Africa, 27 after 8.
This is SAFM Sport with Zai Khan.
Zai, good morning. Bafana are off to that FIFA series in Algeria.
Yeah, and they've got a couple of challenges. They departed yesterday and looking forward to this FIFA series pilot project. Coach Hugo Bruges had to make a couple of changes from the 23-member squad he announced a few days ago, with Sianda Tkulu and Tabang Monare replacing Siabonga Ngazana and Spepele Sitole. Sitole was ruled out through injury, while Ngazana had to withdraw due to travel difficulties in Romania. Now, the FIFA series will run from the 18th to the 26th of March 2024. The Africa Cup of Nations bronze medalists, they'll play their first match against Andorra on the 21st of March at the 1956 Stadium in Annaba, Algeria on Thursday. They then face the host Algeria at the Nelson Mandela Stadium in Algiers on Tuesday, the 26th of March, before returning home the following day. Action last night, Barcelona ending Atletico Madrid's unbeaten home run in La Liga, winning 3-0 at Estadio Metropolitana to cut Real Madrid's league lead back to 8 points. Head coach Xavi Hernandez had to watch the second half of his side's win from the stands after he received a red card before halftime. Patrick Schick scored his first Bundesliga goal in 3 months as Bayer Leverkusen beat Freiburg 3-2 to stay 10 points clear of Bayern Munich. That's in the German title race. Kylian Mbappe scoring a hat-trick as Paris Saint-Germain thrashed Montpellier 6-2 to move 12 points in Ligue 1. Paris Saint-Germain move even further ahead of second-place Brest, who drew 1-1 at home to Lille, and that was earlier in the day. Netball news, the Spa Baby Proteas kicking off their Africa Regional Under-21 World Cup qualifying campaign in impressive fashion. They had a commanding 75-7 victory over Tanzania. All happened at the University of Pretoria yesterday. Golf action, Scotty Scheffler overturned a 5-shot deficit to become the first player to successfully defend the Players' Championship in the tournament's 50-year history. Scheffler carded an eagle and 6 birdies in a flawless closing 64 at TPC Sawgrass to finish 20 under, a shot ahead of US Open champion Wyndham Clark and Open champion Brian Harman and Xander Schauffele. And Olympic news, the long-distance runner Adrian Wildschut lowered his own South African 10,000-meter record in California, crossing the line in 26 minutes, 55.54 seconds. He ended 6th in the race, but he took nearly 30 seconds off his previous mark. Now he's already qualified for the Paris Olympics for the 5,000 meters, and now he will have had qualified in 2 events for the Olympic Games, which starts from the 27th of July to the 11th of August. And finally, cricket, Royal Challengers Bangalore claimed their first Women's Premier League title with an 8-wicket victory over the Delhi Capitals in the final that took place in Delhi. We'll have more sport for you on SFM around 12:30. I'm Zai Khan.
Zai, thanks very much indeed. Good morning. The banning of TikTok by the US, what implications does this have? That's next. You with SFM, leading the conversation, 8:30.
And in the headlines, President Cyril Ramaphosa will this morning address the National Conference on the State of Human Rights in Boksburg, east of Johannesburg, marking the 30th anniversary of the country's constitutional democracy. The conference will be hosted by the Department of Justice and Constitutional Development under the theme 3 Decades of Respect for and Promotion of Human Rights. In other news, residents of Deep Groove Hostel in Soweto have barricaded the N1 and N12 highways with burning tires and rocks to protest against the poor quality of housing and the inhumane conditions of their toilets. And the bail application of 5 of the 7 suspects linked to the murders of rapper Keenan A.K. Forbes and Tebelo Tibbs Mutswane resumes in the Durban Magistrates Court today. I'll be back with more on these and other stories at the top of the hour.
SAFM. guiding you through the rush hour traffic.
Just update on the Diepkloof interchange. The protesting action there just seems to be having an impact now on the N12 going west into the sort of links to the N1 at Diepkloof. So police have been on the scene very early. The backlogs we had earlier this morning on the N1, that's cleared up quite a while ago. But it's just that N12 that's a little bit stubbornly slow as you arrive from sort of the Southgate Mall area. N12, N3 is very heavy today. Big queues running out of Alberton all the way through Bedford View up into Gilooly's interchange territory. The N1 north from Malabongwe through Willie Mandela on your way to Ravonia Road. That stays slow. There's now a breakdown on the N1 north at Allendale, so coming up the N3 and the N1 highways, both jamming into Buccleuch to hook into the N1 through towards Midrand. And the earlier crash on the N1 south between Montana and Stormful Road in Pretoria seems to be out of the way. There's a traffic pattern that is easing now. It's still busy between Montana and the N4 Emeletheni Highway, but the big backlogs, thankfully, a thing of the past there. Durban bound on the N2 stays busy around Tweeny Hill through to Prospect, and M13 is heavy today, coming through from Pinetown on your way to join the N3 at Paradise Valley. Cape Town has been quite a nasty crash on Ottery Road at the M5 highway. If you're driving in from Ottery, passing the golf course there into Youngsfield, that's a really big, heavy backlog. And still plenty of traffic on the N2, jamming up between Robert Sobukwe and a breakdown at Hospital Bend, a stationary vehicle causing a left lane blockage at the bend there. And also going into Somerset West, this earlier crash on the R44 northbound at Jamestown, causing a big delay back past Annandale Road. Rob Byrne, SAFM Traffic.
Mediated conversation on SAFM.
27 minutes now to 9. The time for your mediated conversation this morning. Last week, the US House of Representatives voted to ban the app TikTok from being used in that country, saying they're concerned that the company that owns it, ByteDance, is controlled in some way by the Chinese government or the Chinese Communist Party. TikTok is an app that allows you to post and watch very short videos. Think of it as sort of Twitter for videos rather than text. Many people say that this format makes it really quite addictive, particularly for younger people. The US is not the first country to look at doing this. Both India and Nepal have also banned the app. For the moment, the app is still legal in the US. The ban would have to go through the Senate. If it was banned, it would mean the US government would be banning an app that is used by around half the country. It has over 170 million users in the US. Other countries are also looking at banning the app, including states like Afghanistan, Belgium, New Zealand and Denmark. So then, is it really possible to ban something like this? How seriously can governments take the claim that the company ByteDance could be giving information to China? And what are the implications of all of this for relations between the US and China? First this morning, Zaniwe Ntatisi Asare is an expert on cyber law, public policy and internet governance. Then Professor David Muniai, Director of the Centre for Africa-China Studies at the University of Johannesburg. And finally, Siphumelele Zondi is a senior producer, presenter of Network on the SABC News Channel, also a senior lecturer in the subject. We start then with Zaniwe Ntatisi Asare. Zaniwe, good morning and thanks very much indeed for your time this morning. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Morning, and thank you for having me.
When you use an app like TikTok, what does TikTok learn about you? What does it learn about you in terms of information that could then be given to someone else?
So I think this question goes across the bound for social media networks. TikTok essentially takes your data. Social media platforms take your data. So whatever it is that you give to them. However, what we need to understand is some of the questions, or rather some of the information that we consent to being processed about us could lead to information that we don't directly input. So that could be, your IP address, geolocation. So that's effectively someone knowing where you are, or the platform, or whoever's got access to it, knowing where you are at all times. So it's a combination of what you give yourself and a combination of what you allow them to take from you at any given point in time.
And then they would control that information. It's theirs.
So it really depends. When in the world of perfect policies, when you sign up, they should only have access to what you allow them to, what they explicitly tell you and what you explicitly consent to. However, what we've seen with data breaches over the years is that line gets blurred. Actually, not even blurred. We've had instances where social media CEOs have admitted to a breach of trust, where they would say one thing, but they would do the exact opposite.
Under our law, so South African law for the moment, does the app or the people own it, do they have to keep that information in a particular way, or can they share that information with someone else?
Absolutely. I mean, under South African law, we've got our POPI Act, that really speaks about how data protection works, for South African citizens or within the Republic of South Africa. So it speaks about safety elements. It speaks about access to your own information. It speaks about you having the ability to ask for it to be deleted. But the paramount importance there is consent from the data subject. The second one would be the data subject, having this control over their data. But really, it's about the safety and ensuring that this individual whose information you have is safe. However, what we do need to realize is that if we look at data protection acts like the GDPR in the EU, they're more robust and they'll actually go for you and leave their continent and try and protect EU citizens wherever a breach has occurred. We haven't really seen that kind of action from a South African perspective, and I don't even think at this point in time the mechanisms are as strong, just holistically from a country level to protect South African citizens.
And the other thing is, you wouldn't really know, right? I mean, I would have no idea to even find out where data about me has gone. So hypothetically, if it went to the Chinese Communist Party or to Facebook, I would know nothing about it, and I would probably have to really hire you to help me find out where it had gone.
Generally, for individuals, you wouldn't know, but we do live in a world where, in the same way a breach can happen in that way, there are individuals that have the capacity of finding out. It is quite an expensive task, but it's not doable. However, if we're really looking at this, like you said, Chinese Communist Party, the data protection aspect of things, the sovereignty and the geopolitics. If it were an America-China situation, we know that through these very tense geopolitical actions and the atmosphere that has been created, that's where people will be looking at. That's where the pain point is. And that's where now issues of data protection and data sovereignty are most topical.
Is there any difference between the way a TikTok manages data and a Meta manages data?
I'm so happy that you asked that. Let's take us back to 2016. Remember the Cambridge Analytica situation where we saw a massive influence of, political willpower and a geopolitical influence through social media platforms, where we saw, Donald Trump's campaign through this Cambridge Analytica being exposed all over the world through documentaries, Netflix, etc. A few years later, where it showed that the very same, Mark Zuckerberg's American-based company were performing tasks quite similar to what's being accused right now by TikTok. And, right now with TikTok, there's a supposed link that hasn't necessarily been proved or proven with the Chinese Communist Party. And right now we've got, actual evidence that once upon a time, this is what an American company did. What's interesting for me is just how this reaction is, quite loud, quite loud. Now, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think because we've seen this happen in the past, America does have its right to say what it's saying, but just how they're going to enforce it will be very interesting for me, because there'll be hundreds and thousands of people who will be implicated and hundreds and thousands of people who will be affected.
I'm going to ask you a sort of geopolitical question, but it is about your field, which is 150 years ago, countries would claim, for example, they colonized South Africa because they wanted the gold that was at the Witwatersrand at the time, and the gold gave them the power. Would it be wrong for me to say at this point that information is the new power, and the more you know, if you're China, about Americans, or the more you know if you're Mark Zuckerberg about Americans, the more power that you have, and you would actually be able to wield that power in some way. I'm not entirely sure how you would wield it, but it certainly gives you some power, and I say that because it is obviously valuable.
Well, when I read this headline the first time, I thought to myself, this is the eureka moment I've been waiting for everybody to hear, and I'm glad that America has come to the party. There's a massive paradigm shift when it comes to that, and I love this example that you've made, because we're equating, really. We say data is gold, and now we're seeing what that actually means, because gold comes with power, it comes with influence, it comes with money, and all of those things are true for social media platforms and the data that's being processed. And I think once the powerhouses of the world who have been at the forefront of utilizing this data are now feeling that actually, you know what, we need to protect ourselves as well. It's going to create a wave of better protection measures, a wave of better sensitization and literacy. And in the same way, like you said with the gold rush, now we'll be seeing, you know, better licenses, better utilization rights, and just more robust conversation that will actually be operationalized and actioned. So I think it's a fantastic thing for us. It's not great to be in either, you know, China or America's position right now, but, you know, like any kind of liberation movement or struggle, there will be some people that get caught in the crossfire, and it will only be good for the rest of the world at the end of the day.
Zaniwe Ntatisi Sare, thank you. An expert on cyber law, public policy and internet governance. Right, continuing a mediated conversation out 18 minutes to 9. You with SFM, talking about the US plans to ban TikTok, what it actually tells us. Professor David Monyai is the director of the Center for Africa-China Studies at the University of Johannesburg. Professor Monyai, good morning.
Good morning to you.
Is this about a new scramble for power? I made the example of the scramble for gold, or the scramble for Africa, I suppose, to use maybe an unfortunate or a wrong example, but certainly a scramble for power. Is this a new scramble for power by the powers of China and the United States?
Oh, indeed. I think this is, I agree fully with my colleague. I think what we are seeing happening is what some Indian scholars call as a data colonialism. There's a huge fight between U.S. and Western world led, as well as China on one hand. The talk about decoupling as well as de-risking. I think technology is right at the heart of it as we enter the fourth industrial revolution. Who controls these tools is quite important. So singling out TikTok is just but politics within the U.S. There's a bigger question that my colleague was talking about. Data, who controls data? So as much as United States pointed TikTok, more questions are asked, or that we should be asking about U.S. technology that we use. There's absolutely no difference. TikTok, Facebook, all of them are doing the same. What it means is that they are mining our data, and it's not sitting in our own sovereign land. It's sitting right in California. We have no control to the very same data, which is ours, and it's all about hegemony at the end of the day. So as the competition heats up, United States is finding it extremely hard that it does not lead in this technology in some of them. So it's TikTok today, Huawei yesterday. There's a talk about port logistic facilities, trying to build cranes in the ports, as well as the electrical vehicles. So we're going to hear more of this on a daily basis. At the heart of it, it's all about who dominates in the battle for technological dominance in the world.
I accept your point that there's no difference between what ByteDance and Meta are doing with our data. If I may take the American position for just a moment, Professor Monyai, I suppose the argument that they would say is that no one could seriously argue that Facebook or Meta and the American government work together. In other words, for the Americans, their public sort of claim, let me sort of summarize it, is that Facebook's an independent company, or Meta's an independent company, and yes, it may use that data for wrong things, but it's not going to government. And they would then say they are not sure about the relationship between ByteDance and the Chinese government or the Chinese Communist Party, which are kind of the same thing, but not at all the same thing. So is there anything in that? And I suppose what this gets to is ByteDance controlled in some way by the Chinese Communist Party?
But the simple answer is that we don't know. But what we know 100% is what Snowden told us. So there isn't much difference, whatever the Chinese are doing and what Americans are doing. As governments, they have direct access to intelligence in terms of using of these technologies. So to really point and see who is better than the other, it's a problem. I think the bigger question for us as South Africans and Africans is that what is happening to our own data. So this is the end of globalization. What we are seeing happening is deglobalization, where you Europe will protect its own data. Africa should protect its own data. So there isn't any universal laws, regulation to regulate in terms of governance on these issues of technology. I think those are the bigger question we need to pay more attention to than the bickering between the United States and China over dominance issues, which we really don't have a bone in it.
Okay, again, to assume the American position for the sake of argument, when Google, which is, the big American company, tried to go into China, it was told it had to censor certain search results, and you could argue that was the Chinese government putting conditions on an American competitor. And if that's the case, can't the US government put certain conditions on a Chinese app like TikTok?
Well, indeed. I think what is happening here is that China has the big China wall, firewall. I think that's what Chinese are arguing, is that any company that invests this big tech, Facebook, they are not banned. They are just asked to keep the data in China. And there are certain issues that they don't allow in terms of access to different ideological issues which China protects. And that is quite different when it comes to TikTok and Huawei. It's just a dominant issue. And we are used to this. Anything that the United States is not leading, it tends to find a security dimension. And I think it's going to backfire on the United States, and it's raising a lot of issues because the world is watching. And bigger question, if TikTok is banned, we need also to ask question about Facebook and others. They have been collecting data and they have been abusing the data. It's not what we are saying, it's what Americans are saying themselves. The former President Trump is totally against Facebook, and we have watched quite a lot of documentaries, what's happening in the United States, where we see these big giants are dominating and no regulation, they are not governed. So there are a lot of debates that are taking place. So I think we need to go just beyond the TikTok story.
It's not just the US, though. It's also India that's banned TikTok. And I mean, that's because of their relationship with China. So I suppose what I'm trying to get to is that yes, we're talking about the US, and yes, we should. They're the sort of dominant player in a way. But there's something happening around China that's made India ban it too, and Nepal.
Well, no doubt about it. India and China have huge issues around the border issue, and which spill over to all other issues. And therefore, we have to understand that as China rises, there is quite a number of other countries that find competition and want to push back, and the equality in terms of their own technologies. So there's a dominant. India does not accept China as a lead in Asia. So this it's just a nationalism at its highest level. So the Indians won't be different from the Chinese. There will be issues when India reaches the point of China.
Professor David Munyai, thank you, Director of the Centre for Africa-China Studies at the University of Johannesburg. Your mediated conversation will continue in a moment. We'll ask, could TikTok be banned here too? Siphumelela Zondi is your next guest. You're with SAFM, 10 minutes to 9.
SAFM, guiding you through the rush hour traffic.
Let's kick it off with a update from Pretoria from the N1 South after the big crash this morning. Traffic seems to be moving through now. The collision between the Sefaka Makato on-ramp and Storm Road have had everything badly backed up this morning, but traffic does seem to be moving a little bit slow as you approach the N4 highway. That's the Emelafeni exit, but that just may be the final bits and pieces of the backlog clearing through, so that's a much improved situation. Down into Deepcliff, the N12 and N1 highways, that's clear as well. There was some early morning pressure around protesting on the N1 going north and then on the N12 west, but it's all seemed to have normalised through there. N3 stays pretty heavily backed from Germiston through to Bedfordview, and a breakdown this morning on the N1 north at Allendale, so also just coming up that N3 from Linbro Park at the top of the N1 from Sunninghill. Quite busy getting through Buccleuch onto the N1 for a trip through Midrand. Also breakdown after William Mandela up towards Rivonia Road, so the N1 North still queuing as well. Coming through from Pine Town on your way to Durban, the M13 stays sluggish in towards Paradise Valley. Coming off the N3 off the M13 onto the N3 stays busy. Looking okay, Ashburton through Cato Ridge area, no problems there, but there is a backlog coming through Pietermaritzburg from Chotamotala down through New England and Ortman Road. That's a broken down vehicle towards the bottom of the Pietermaritzburg bypass. And Cape Town Ottery Road is under pressure from Ottery moving through to the M5. That's a crash scene just as you come up to the M5 highway. And the N1 inbound, the breakdown of Plattekloof Road's being cleared, but the N1 into town from Plattekloof Hill territory all the way through to the elevated freeway is quite full of slow-go traffic still at this hour. Rob Byrne, SAFM Traffic.
Mediated conversation on SAFM.
Continuing your mediated conversation around the US House of Representatives' decision to ban TikTok, not yet banned, but of course raises all sorts of issues about the United States, China, and really the global fight for information. Siphumelele Bzondi is a senior producer and presenter of Network on the SABC News Channel, senior lecturer in the subject as well. Siphumelele, good morning. Thanks for your time.
Thanks very much for inviting me, Stephen.
Could this kind of ban ever happen here? I can't remember, and I don't watch it nearly as closely as you do, but I can't remember any app being banned by our government.
No, we haven't actually had anything similar. But could it happen? Yes, it could, hypothetically, because just like in America, any bill can be put through Parliament and brought to Parliament by any member of Parliament, which would include a deputy minister or a minister. So, and then can be debated. We saw it in America a couple of months ago when the CEO of TikTok was brought to in front of American lawmakers, asked questions including whether he has Chinese citizenship, and he said no, he's from Singapore and he doesn't have Chinese citizenship, to the point that he was asked if he is a member of the Chinese Communist Party, which then would suggest that it's not about his work as a CEO, which would also suggest that it's not quite about TikTok being basically doing the work it does. It's about where TikTok comes from, to the point that you'd ask the CEO if he's a member of the Communist Party in China, even though he's already told you that he is not Chinese. So it seems bigger than that. And could it happen? It could, but it's unlikely to happen because we have a constitution that does protect free speech and freedom of expression, but you would think America does too, because as a democracy, they also would have free speech and freedom of expression. But it seems to be bigger than that in America right now.
Indeed. Technically, is it possible? I mean, when I go online to look at an app to download, I mean, I don't see how the South African government would know anything about that. Whether it's the iPhone store or the Android one, or all the rest. I mean, would it even be possible to do that? Would you be able to enforce such a law?
Technically, it is possible. It has happened in various countries, but you have to have a country where democracy is not pretty much like ours, where governments are working with tech companies. For example, in countries where, for example, the internet gets blocked in times of civil strife. In the past, even South Africa's Vodacom has said that they did it in the DRC, for example, and gave a statement that said if you operate in that country, the government can dictate how you do business in that country and whether you block the internet or not. So yes, in a country where the government works like that, yes, technically they can get information directly from tech companies. In America, by the way, almost on a yearly basis, the American government goes to tech companies that include Meta, which owns Facebook, to request certain information about certain individuals. Sometimes companies like that say yes, and they do pass on that information to the American authorities, and sometimes they do say no. So it does happen even in countries that are democracy, where some of these tech giants have been founded.
It would seem almost that if you look at the fact that 170 million Americans use this app, it must be too big to close. I mean, there would be an economic impact. People use it to advertise their companies, for example, and they only use TikTok because it's free.
And interestingly, they've requested TikTok to sell as well. And you can only guess who they want TikTok to sell to, possibly an American company, because they realize how big it actually has become. And it's money, I suppose, that's been pumped into a Chinese company. Remember that there was a similar situation with Huawei, where Huawei even lost access to Android, which is owned by an American company, which is American as well, and that has hurt Huawei on the sale of mobile devices. So it seems to be not just a target on TikTok, but on other Chinese companies as well, and how massive they've become over a number of years, because it seems that they allow them to launch, right? And then once they see them to become too big, there then are these type of bans that seem to happen.
If TikTok were banned, would it be possible for a competitor or something that does exactly the same thing to take over? And I've been interested, for example, I forget, was it called Threads? I think it was a Facebook service that was supposed to sort of take over from Twitter or X when it went through some of its managerial disasters. And I've heard nothing. I heard about it on the launch, and I heard nothing about it since. I mean, can you really replace a TikTok?
Can you replace a TikTok? In all likeliness, no, because it seems like with what they've done, they first tested it on the Chinese audience, and they've perfected how TikTok actually works and grabs audiences and keeps people glued on the screen longer than just about any other social media platform. But that would be the hope, and that's why there was this request for them to sell before getting this particular ban. So maybe they could sell to a company that would be favorable to the American government. But can it be replicated? They can try, but I don't see it. I don't see any other company managing to do it as well as TikTok, because their algorithm is pretty good if you compare it to any other social network.
I suppose in the end, to try and do this is a drastic act. And I think even some in America realize that despite what happened in Congress, getting it through Senate is going to be very tough because it's a drastic act.
It is, yes. I heard you asking another guest earlier on about China having blocked certain companies as well. You made an example with Google. But China does not pretend to be a democracy. China does not pretend to have free speech. They do clamp down on even pro-democracy protesters or protesters against the Chinese government on any other situation. So for this to happen in a country that in the past has called itself the leader of the free world, and a clamp down on what people can access and cannot access, and information, and what information they can access and cannot access, and where they can get the information, or where they can be blocked from getting that information. It is quite drastic, and it makes you wonder whether Americans are really allowed to get information, because I believe that if information is coming from wherever it's coming from, if you call yourself a democracy, then you let people make up their own minds. But they do say that what they're worried about is where that information eventually gets, and America has worried in the past about that, especially with the belief that that was information that was extracted from Facebook even led to who won an American election in the past.
Siphumelele Zondi, thank you. Senior producer, presenter of Network on the SABC News Channel, a senior lecturer in the subject, as you can hear. Really appreciate the time. My thanks also to Professor David Moniai, Director at the Centre for Africa-China Studies at the University of Johannesburg, and Zaniwa Ntasisi Asare is an expert on cyber law, public policy and internet governance. We will be back with you tomorrow. Thanks very much indeed for being with us. Kathy is next from Mdu, Stanza and Paul. Melissa, myself, look after yourself. You with SFM leading the conversation, 9 o'clock.
Independent and impartial. This is SAFM News.
And with the top stories at 9, I'm Nomalizo Mandela. Spotlight on state of human rights in the country, and Naledi Pandor to start working visit to the US and Jamaica. Good morning. President Cyril Ramaphosa will this morning address the National Conference on the State of Human Rights in Boksburg, east of Johannesburg, marking the 30th anniversary of the country's constitutional democracy. The conference will be hosted by the Department of Justice and Constitutional Development under the theme 3 Decades of Respect for and Promotion of Human Rights. The conference will provide an opportunity to unpack the hurdles that have impacted the progress towards the realization of human rights. Spokesperson for the department is Crispin Piri, explaining the significance of the conference.
This year marks the 30th anniversary of our democracy. And so this conference sitting at this time of the year enables us to really look at how far we've come as a democracy, particularly along the respect for human rights. South Africa, of course, having its history, a turbulent history with human rights, but also having a progressive history of having the most advanced constitution in the world. This conference will really delve into the aspect of human rights, how far we have come, and what more we need to do to deepen a human rights culture.
Residents of Deep Kloof Hostel in Soweto have barricaded the N1 and N12 highways with burning tires and rocks to protest against the poor quality of housing and the inhumane conditions of their toilets. Community leaders in the hostel say they have attempted to communicate with the Office of the Premier and Johannesburg Mayor, but they have not received any response. The South African Police and Johannesburg Metro Police are currently on the scene to handle the situation. The Water and Sanitation Department says the amount of leaks in the municipal water distribution systems in Gauteng has increased over the past 10 years due to a lack of maintenance of the distribution systems by municipalities. For the past few weeks, City of Johannesburg has been grappling with serious water outages. The department says it has planned a second phase of the Lesotho Highlands project to bring more water to Gauteng from the mountains in Lesotho. Department's Director General, Dr. Sean Phillips, has urged all the municipalities in the province to conserve water and avoid water leakage.
The public in Gauteng, in Johannesburg and in other municipalities need to use water more sparingly. Problem is that the current situation is that when there are heat waves or when there are disruptions due to, for example, electrical breakdown, then because the demand is very close to the available supply of water from rainwater, it means that it becomes very difficult for the reservoirs to fill and then supply water to higher lying areas. So those are the main causes of why we're in a difficult situation in Johannesburg.
The bail application of 5 of the 7 suspects linked to the murders of rapper Keenan A.K. Forbes and Tibelo Tibbs Motswane resumes in the Durban Magistrates Court today. The court has already heard affidavits from 2 of the accused, where one of them, Lindogu Mkhwanazi, stated he was forced to confess. All 5 accused face 12 counts, including 2 murders, conspiracy to commit murder, unlawful possession of a firearm and ammunition, and money laundering. Forbes and Motswane were killed in Florida Road in Durban last year. Mkhwanazi's lawyer, Advocate Simpiwe Mlojwa, addressed the court on the last appearance.
The assault upon me by the police started immediately. Though I had been told when arrested in Mtubatuba that my arrest was connected with the death of Mr. William Gunene, I was greatly surprised that during this assault brought to bear by police upon me and also tubing me, they were demanding me to make a confession statement to the matter of a well-known musician, Mr. AKA, instead of Gunene matter for which I had been arrested. I denied steadfastly any involvement with the matter of Mr. AKA.
Meanwhile, the NPA in KwaZulu-Natal says the National Director of Public Prosecutions, Advocate Shamila Batoy, has signed the necessary documentation to extradite the remaining 2 suspects from Eswatini. Spokesperson Natasha Ramkinson-Kara elaborates.
With regards to the extradition matter, the NPA can confirm that the National Director of Public Prosecutions has signed the relevant documents. These documents have been forwarded to the Department of Justice, who is the central authority. They will then have to forward the documents further.